Chapter 127 Tribulation Poison. While Yvonne refined Hubert's dark fog, Conrad activated his origin sight to analyze that problematic body of hers. However, Yvonne's two divine physiques were like shields, covering her inner body in a mirage that prevented anyone from seeing its secrets. With Conrad's current cultivation level, he couldn't break through their concealment. Likewise, his female dream theft couldn't peer into her core desires. Not that he was thinking of using it at the moment. Is there any way for me to help her? At his wits' ends, he asked the system. Well, theoretically, there is more than one. None that you can use at the moment, though. Conrad frowned. The system's vision seemed all-seeing, capable of breaking through any barriers. Therefore, Conrad wasn't surprised that it could see through what he couldn't. First, although the root of this poison is in blood, it is not physical. This is a poison bred through the tribulation force of two tribulation stage experts. Considering the might and density, at least one of them should be at the cross-tribulation saint rank, while the other should have reached the fate-destroying saint rank. Immediately, Conrad attributed the poison's concoction to Gerhard and Amalia. Heaven doesn't punish without reason. Tribulation doesn't fall without cause. It exists because of that cause and is bound to her body and fate. To cleanse it through normal means is impossible. But if you just want to suppress it, you can use three methods. First, use a large amount of tribulation force from a cross-tribulation saint to temporarily suppress its effects. That is what she's currently doing. Conrad nodded in understanding. Second, use the blood of the medium, the one whose blood was used in the poison's concoction to temporarily suppress the poison. All her sins are bound to that person's lineage. I believe you know who that is. It didn't take a genius to figure out that Ulrich was the medium. Third, you can also use a tribulation-suppressing artifact. As long as she wears it, she will never feel the poison's effect. That's also the first method available to you. It's also the cheapest. The cheapest? While Conrad had never sought such an artifact, the tribulation stage was the second great strata of the holy rank. How could an artifact of that level be cheap? At least hundreds of millions of EXP would be required. Still, with his current resources, this was something he could obtain in just a few days. Therefore, calling it cheap wasn't necessarily excessive. What about the other methods at my disposal? Now it gets more complicated, and they're all bound to you. The second method at your disposal is your Stolas physique. Currently, it has reached the mastered transcendent level, but if you could bring it to the mastered holy level, you could erase that poison in a heartbeat. Lord Stolas is the founder of all poisons, be it physical, spiritual, or cultivation-related. As long as it falls into the poison category, there is nothing his lineage cannot control or obliterate. Unfortunately, you have the physique but not the blood. However, for such a poison, the physique should be enough. With the system, Conrad could directly upgrade his physiques to whatever rank he could afford, and instantly bring them to the awakened stage. However, the system couldn't propel him to the mastered stage. This was something he had to do on his own. That being the case, this option would cost too much time. What else? Upgrade your bloodline to the Phantasm Lord stage. At this stage, among other things, you can use the power generated by a contract to turn all desires into reality as long as they don't exceed the scope of your bloodline. That would be the holy rank. Therefore, if she's willing to sign a contract with you in exchange of dispelling that poison, you would obtain the means to eradicate it on the spot. Although limited by a contract, this was a monstrous ability that terrified even Conrad. However, at the end of the day, Yvonne was from the Holy Continent. With their current relationship, how could he reveal himself as a demon? That was at best unwise, at worst suicidal. He couldn't take that gamble yet. Another option is to upgrade your primal physique to the holy level. The great primal ancestor is the founder of righteous dual cultivation. His aim, to provide a method for two souls to cross the bitter, lonely road of cultivation hands in hands. That forever, they could rely on one another, sharing worries and woes. If you can bring your primal physique to the awakened holy level, you can bind your souls, dual cultivate with her, and help her cross that tribulation, restore her pure selves, and return her to her past glory. There is even a chance that she can directly reach the tribulation stage. Those are all the options available to you. While this option seemed to be the easiest solution, the dual cultivation requirement made it relatively complicated. Still, in the business of subduing women, Conrad never lacked confidence. That being the case, he would go with that one. His eyes returned onto Yvonne, who breathed in and out at regular intervals while the refinement carried on. One after the other, the veins popping across her body vanished while she returned to her usual self. Following 3 hours, she completely refined Hubert's dark fog, thoroughly suppressing the poison, for the time being. She exhaled one last time before her eyes opened, falling back onto Conrad's. Complex emotions flashed within, but surprise prevailed above all others. Surprising that after all those centuries, the Father that abjured me still cares enough to condense such a large amount of tribulation force for my sake. More surprising, that he is willing to entrust this to a 17-year-old boy with doubtful background. Speak true, who are you that my father is willing to let go of all apprehensions to entrust this task to you? To Yvonne's inquiry, Conrad's lips curled into a winning smile. The world's #1 talent, his chosen son-in-law, and your future husband, Conrad's unabashed reply, caused even Yvonne to feel startled. She arched her eyebrows while blinking in silence with disbelief clearly written on her face. I believe it is the first time I see someone call himself talent in front of me. Even the prime disciple of the Celestial Church didn't have that courage. Audacious. I like. However, what makes you think that you can succeed where so many before you failed? Yvonne had, after all, centuries behind her. Nothing Conrad did could truly startle her. At best, it would make her appreciate him and increase his value in her eyes. I believe all others failed because they missed the first step. Understanding. No one can understand you, they only know how to please you. I will understand you. Then, I will conquer you, forever imprinting myself on your soul. When the sun rises in the sky, it is me that you shall see. When it descends, replaced by the moon, my image shall still hold your sight. And at the interval between the two, your yearning for me shall drive you onward. Conrad's eyes gleamed with unconstrained desire. Though in the past, she had many admirers, among those who dared approach her, none had the nerves to make their intentions so blatant, to speak such overbearing, dissolute words. In a way, it was endearing. Yvonne didn't take Conrad seriously, seeing in him a way to relieve the boredom she'd been accumulating across all those centuries. Her lips curled into a demonic smile while her eyes nailed Conrad's soul. She stood up, stepped toward the door, then turned to face Conrad while condensing a long sword out of her semi-holy force which she aimed at his neck. With just those words, I could kill you 1,000 times. However, I've never been a narrow-minded person and always liked a challenge. I will give you one opportunity, the same I've given so many before you. Fight me, at the same cultivation level, in the same conditions. If you can shoulder 10 of my moves, I will not kill you, allowing you to remain by my side. If you cannot, then it means you only have worthless arrogance. If you can take 100, we can be friends. 1,000, and I will support you throughout a lifetime, regardless of your endeavors. Do you dare? Conrad didn't bat an eyelid, facing Yvonne with the same carefreeness. What if I defeat you? Yvonne shook her head. That is impossible. However, if by some untold miracle you manage to do it, I can open my heart to you. Though, you might not like what you find within. Did His Majesty go through the same deal? A barely noticeable ripple flashed within Yvonne's face. Of course not. To say nothing of the past, even today, whether Ulrich can withstand 10 of my moves at the same level is still a matter of debate. The nature of our relationship involves many secrets I would only share with a friend. However, I have none. That was to say that among the innumerable talents that sought her hand, not one could exchange 100 blows at the same level. Conrad's fighting spirit was aroused. Challenge accepted. Chapter 128, Conrad vs. Yvonne Part 1. Brave or foolhardy, we will see soon enough. I will give you the rest of the day to finish your preparations, and use any method at your disposal to reach the best fighting state possible. At night, come meet me in the central courtyard. I will be waiting." Conrad said nothing further, stepped out, and returned to his quarters. Without hesitation, he stepped into his space mansion. Since Yvonne chose the words, "use any method at your disposal," then clearly, she suspected he possessed his own secrets and was telling him he could use them without fear of getting exposed. That being the case, he would no longer put up the flag of wariness. He still had 7 hours before night announced itself. Within the Space Mansion's special room, that was 70 hours and almost 3 days. Perhaps that wasn't enough to significantly improve his cultivation, but he could use it for other things. His current EXP count was barely above 4 million. Therefore, he gathered his harem for a massive cultivation orgy, following which his EXP count returned to above 270 million. He also learned that the system's cooldown couldn't get abused by time treasures. Therefore, he stopped there. With 60 million EXP, he upgraded his 100-flower scripture to the semi-holy rank. He first considered doing the same with his 3 physiques, but soon dismissed the idea. After all, awakened semi-holy physiques he would have a hard time making use of weren't necessarily better than mastered transcendent physiques he fully grasped. Instead, he invested in 4th circle spells, the area where he was currently the most lacking in, buying a whopping 5 high-grade 4th circle spells. His EXP count dropped back to 165 million and some change. For the following 2 days, he only did one thing: fight, sharpening himself against his semi-saint maids and trying to grasp as much of his new abilities as possible. It was not possible to make up for the vast experience gap in 2 days. However, it would still significantly improve his chances. At the end of the 2nd day, Conrad restored his strength, then returned to the outside world. There, he still had a good hour left. An hour he spent in meditation, steadying himself, and sharpening his senses in preparations for the upcoming clash. "Since I've met Yvonne, you've been silent, as if scared into hiding by her presence." "What? Don't tell me you're afraid." Conrad goaded the flame mark, which had oddly fell silent following his encounter with Yvonne. "If you don't need me, why should I speak up?" The flame mark replied without delay. "What do you think my chances are against her?" Both the system and flame mark possessed extensive knowledge of the ancient crystal world and the higher realms. However, for some reasons, for matters regarding battles, Conrad would rather rely on the flame mark. Since her last demonstration, there is one assumption I've yet to confirm. Before that, since you can't use your lineage weapon, I say we can celebrate if you can handle 1,000 moves. If my assumption proves correct, however, just know that you have unimaginable room for growth. Don't be disheartened by one setback. The flame mark's words took Conrad aback, filling him with discomfort. It was the first time it showed so little faith in him. Although Yvonne's cultivation talent, foundation, and experience were all at the top, she was, ultimately, a mortal world scion. Even if he couldn't defeat her, he didn't believe he couldn't handle 1,000 moves. As for her awakened divine physiques, how much of their power could she control when her cultivation was restricted to the transcendent rank? He shook his head and resumed perfecting his state of mind. The hour passed by in a flash. Conrad stood up and stepped toward the central courtyard where Yvonne awaited alone. Night had fallen on the imperial palace, with the stars slowly showing themselves to bear witness to the confrontation. Yvonne stood in the middle of the courtyard, looking as bewitching as ever. As Conrad reached the courtyard, her lips curled into a winning smile while her eyes locked on him. "Punctual, I like. Since you had the nerves to show up, even if you can't handle 10 of my moves, I will spare your life. Don't worry, I've already sealed the area. No one will hear or see your disgrace." That those were her first words only showed in how little regard she held him. Conrad didn't appear offended. "Underestimate me, and you're in for terrible surprises. Times change. In the past, you may have been the world's #1 talent, but today, that title will change hands." "Oh." Yvonne felt like crushing the confidence of such an audacious youth was a pity. However, without setbacks, how could there be growth? This fight was not only an opportunity she'd offered Conrad, but a thank-you gift for bringing her the box. A gift to prevent him from going astray on the path of cultivation. How many meridians do you currently have? 6. And you still haven't completed your first fleshly transformation? How many do you want? Yvonne asked, perplexed. The average transcendent level cultivation completed their first transformation with 3 natal meridians. Most talents relied on a mixture between concealed and ethereal meridians. As for supreme meridians, to say nothing of building a foundation on them, those capable of condensing them were all the prize jewels of the world's superpowers. After all, the lack of supreme meridians was the main reason why, after the founders of the Celestial Church and Infernal Cult, who descended onto this world at the Divine Ascension rank, no one could reach the peak of the Divine Transformation rank and break through Divine Ascension. From the density of Conrad's incomplete transcendent force, she could feel several supreme meridians hiding. Unless he was the secret disciple of a formidable superpower, he should have already completed his first fleshly transformation. I want 12. The perfect cycle. Conrad's ambition convinced Yvonne that he didn't have a full grasp of the difficulty. Even she was forced to stop at the 11th. Condensing 12 meridians before each transformation required much more than talent and resources. At the peak of the transcendent rank, she had 99 meridians, 9 short of the limit. Of those 99s, 90 were supreme meridians. As for the remaining 9, very well. Instantaneously, Yvonne lowered her cultivation to the first step Transcendent Priest and half-step Transcendent Knight with 6 meridians. Just like Conrad, they now stood opposite to one another, their eyes interlocked and their focus at its peak. The tension was almost palpable. Yvonne unfolded her hands, channeling the incomplete transcendent force of a half-step Transcendent Knight alongside Conrad. You have talent, you have will, but what you cruelly lack is experience. Allow me to gift you that experience through sheer terror. A vast force far exceeding the limits of the transcendent rank exploded from Yvonne's form, barreling into Conrad. You are too arrogant. Your talent may have been unrivaled until now, but that doesn't mean no one will ever be able to compete with you. Conrad's incomplete transcendent force exploded from his body, counterattacking Yvonne's in a pure contest of aura. It is arrogance if you cannot back up your words. But when you can, it is merely confidence. Yvonne took a step forward and appeared before Conrad with her first raised in a jab. Her move was fast, but not fast enough to startle Conrad, whose primary advantage was speed. However, he didn't want to evade. He wanted to meet that blow head-on and start the fight on a bang, to clearly tell her that he was her match. A terrible mistake. Bang! Conrad met Yvonne's jab with one of his own, but as their fists collided and their meridian's powers erupted, a deafening explosion propelled them both backward. Yvonne took 3 steps back before stabilizing herself, while Conrad was propelled into the air and backflipped to land back on his feet, staggering. Both then raised their heads and with the same astonishment exclaimed in tandem, "You have God Meridians?" Chapter 129, Conrad vs. Yvonne Part 2. This time, Yvonne was genuinely astonished. Never in her wildest dreams did she expect Conrad to possess God Meridians. And from their confrontation, she could sense 3. How did he obtain them? As for Conrad, better than anyone, he understood the meaning of God Meridians. Therefore, he couldn't understand why those would appear on Yvonne's body. It is indeed what I feared. When I saw her supreme overlord physique, I already doubted this, but now, I'm thoroughly convinced. That woman must have refined a large quantity of blood from a divine ascension expert from the infernal realm. The supreme overlord physique is the trademark of Hell's most dreadful family. In this world, only the founder of the infernal cult possessed this physique. She must have chanced on his corpse and refined his blood. That is how she established her supreme foundation. Conrad recalled that the Tower of Rebirth concealed the corpses of all the leaders of the celestial and infernal realm throughout history. Was it possible that Yvonne went through the trials of the Tower of Rebirth and obtained such a chance? But he wasn't given time to pursue his thoughts that Yvonne's voice echoed. You were right. I underestimated you. There were only two sources of God meridians in the world, the bodies of the infernal cult and celestial church's founders. If Conrad obtained his from them, it meant he went through the Tower of Rebirth and found the current location of their corpses. However, although she'd only taken 3 steps back, Yvonne could feel her right arm slightly trembling. With the gap between their physiques, that was completely abnormal. And from his God meridians, she felt a degree of purity that completely surpassed hers. Unless he was a peak stage divine transformation expert in disguise, the only explanation was that he was born with those meridians. But how could that be? What would the son of a god be doing on this world? Her mind overflowed with questions. However, she set them all aside to focus on the fight at hand. Even the son of a god would have to kneel in front of her. As Conrad steadied himself and activated his origin sight, Yvonne's eyes shone with unprecedented battle intent. She stretched out her hands, summoning a long sword which she held within her 2 hands while adopting a fighting stance. Within that stance, Conrad could see absolutely no flaw, and it was almost as if Yvonne became one with her sword, making it an extension of her body. The vast killing intent coating her at all times exploded alongside that unparalleled aura of martial excellence as she shot toward Conrad. He dared not meet the blow head-on, using his full speed to step out of her range, but to no avail. Wherever he went, she would greet him as if her peerless fighting instinct allowed her to predict his moves before he could make them. Her sword came crashing from the side. Conrad turned into 3 afterimages to evade the blow. However, Yvonne spotted the true among the fake and drove her sword through him. Purple light burst from Conrad's body, and he turned into light particles, avoiding the blow and reforming a few steps away. Yvonne gave him no time to breathe. Before he could regain his foothold, she was again on him. Conrad used his light attribute, bloodline, physiques, and meridians to push his speed to the limit and evade another 3 blows. However, he was constantly on the defensive, unable to find an opening to strike back. Yvonne's blows were masterful, her swordsmanship having long since reached the pinnacle. There was neither waste nor excesses, and each stroke aimed to destroy the opponent. At this rate, before I can establish her pattern, I will lie on the floor. Moreover, her style is ever-changing. There is no definite pattern. Yvonne had yet to use an attribute, spell, or one of her physique special abilities. Yet, Conrad had already been pushed back to this level, even resorting to his light attribute. If things carried on in this way, it would be a miracle if he could take 100 moves. Conrad spun, summoned a warhammer, and rotated to crash his massive weapon upon Yvonne's sword slash. Clang. His hammer blow met Yvonne's sword in a loud ringing noise, the sheer force of the collision pushing them both back. However, Yvonne took 7 steps back while Conrad only took 2, and in a flash, he was upon her with his hammer raised for another smashing blow. The blow came from her left. Yvonne didn't evade, doing something Conrad had failed to expect. With her sword, she deflected his blow, making his swing go wide and letting his own strength turn against him as he lost balance. Then, she kicked him right in the jaw, sending him spiraling in the air to drop onto the ground. With a somersault, Conrad managed to land back on his feet. However, blood now dripped from the corners of his lips. This was the 9th move. The hammer might be a mighty weapon, but first and foremost, it is a battlefield tool. In a duel, it can't compete with a sword. Your tremendous arm strength might make up for the speed impediment, but you cannot enforce versatility on a weapon that doesn't possess it. Yvonne vanished, reappearing right by Conrad's side. With a feint, she misled him to the left, then sent another kick into his right side. Again, he flew but landed back on his feet. Theoretically, that's 11. Congratulations, you're now entitled to stay by my side. The warm-up is also over. Yvonne held her sword in a vertical axis, aiming it toward the ground. If you have any skills, bring them on, lest you say I didn't give you a chance. Realm of Eternal Darkness. Yvonne's hairs fluttered in the air, while dark fog erupted from her body and spread into the vicinity, covering everything in a dark field. Conrad fell victim to the dark field. In a flash, All light vanished from his sight, and only pure darkness remained. But that was only the beginning. First, he lost his sight, then it was his smell, hearing, taste, and touch. One after the other, he lost control of his five senses. This was one of the abilities of Yvonne's second physique, her true natal constitution. The extreme dark physique. Yvonne then flipped her sword on a 90-degree angle, and 4 dark circles appeared by her side. Fourth circle spell, Shadow's Call. The soil became a wave of dark fog from which dozens upon dozens of dark hands grew and flew toward Conrad, who still struggled against the sudden loss of his senses. And as the shadow hands approached him from all sides, Conrad dropped on his knees, barely holding onto his hammer. But at that time, fourth circle spell, Light Spear Rain. For circles of purple light appeared by Conrad's side, and from them, a deluge of light spears descended onto the incoming shadow hands, splitting them into fogs of darkness. Purple lightning erupted from Conrad's body as he rose back from his feet and with dilated pupils, stared at Yvonne. You're right, only now does the real fight begins. Good, very good. Conrad, I've never held this much expectations for a fight at the same level. Yvonne couldn't suppress glee from spreading within her words. The more she looked at Conrad, the more pleasing to the eyes he seemed, and the feeling of catching up to years of wasted time slowly grew within her. I was time to go all out. Using his origin sight to make up for his senses' loss, Conrad turned into 44 afterimages, then summoned his Imperial Avatar. A miniature Conrad gleaming in diamond light appeared within the air, hovering above the field. As if endowed with a mind of its own, that little Conrad began casting spells. Fourth circle spell, Lesser Light Elemental. Fourth circle spell, Lesser Fire Elemental. Fourth circle spell, Conflagration. In a flash, Conrad's Imperial Avatar simultaneously fired 3 spells. Multicasting was something only high-level soul avatars could accomplish. As for triple casting, that was a privilege of Imperial Avatars. Moreover, the might of the spells they fired was tremendously higher than that of the lower-ranked avatars. 2 sets of 4 fire circles and 4 light circles appeared within the air. From them emerged 2 giants, one of pure light and one of pure flames, while from the remaining 4, a torrent of fire erupted, soaring toward Yvonne. At the same time, the 44 Conrad shot toward her in dazzling rays of purple light and lightning. Troublesome, Yvonne whispered with a smile. Although she also possessed an Imperial Avatar, due to the Church monopolizing everything that concerned the spiritual path, her panoply of fourth circle spells wasn't as diversified as Conrad's. However, she still knew a few. A miniature version of Yvonne appeared above her head, also glittering in diamond light. Fourth circle spell, Mirror of Evanescence. A tall shadow mirror sprang from 4 circles of darkness and shot toward the geyser of flames, eroding them, then pressing onto the 2 elementals. Meanwhile, Conrad had surrounded Yvonne from all sides and descended upon her with a flurry of blows. Shadow doppelgangers. Yvonne used the second ability of her extreme dark physique, and from the dark fog surrounding her, condensed 6 doppelgangers. But while their number seemed inferior, unlike Conrad's, which were only speed mirages created by his light attribute, Yvonne's were made of flesh. The 7 Yvonne counterattacked, exchanging dozens of blows with Conrad, while the dark force surrounding them eroded his strength. To think that even when limited to the transcendent rank, her divine physique can exhibit such terrible powers. Hateful, primal force, noxious field. Conrad used 2 of his mastered physique's abilities to first obliterate Yvonne's field of darkness, then take control of the area with a poisonous fog of his own. The more challenging the battle was, the greater Yvonne's delight. Black flames burst from the 7 Yvonne's bodies and spread in the vicinity, obliterating the poisonous fog as she shot toward Conrad. Suppression. Vibrations spread throughout the air alongside a terrible suppression force that locked Conrad from all sides, preventing moves and escape. Primal force. The primal physique's primal force once again erupted, this time centered around Conrad. His strength and resilience shot up while the suppression force around him drastically lessened. Still, as they exchanged blows, his moves dulled, and at this rate, defeat would ensue. Bang! Empowered by their dark blaze, the 7 Yvonne simultaneously struck, sending Conrad flying while the two avatars still clashed within the air. Enzu beast form. Since the primal force wasn't enough, Conrad threw caution to the wind and resorted to his Enzu beast physique's ability. His shape changed, and in the blink of an eyelid, he morphed into a terrifying lion-headed eagle. In that form he spread his wings, condensing a conflagration at his left, a tidal wave at his right, and a dreadful storm from his beak. The three forces barreled into Yvonne, destroying her 6 shadow doppelgangers and sending her flying backward with blood spurting from her lips. Isn't he human? Why can he use the physique of an Enzu beast? Yvonne didn't waste much time in contemplation, steadying herself in the air. Never mind, let the dance continue. Overlord's might. Terrible force erupted from Yvonne's body. It was as if the world was falling onto his knees, bending to welcome the arrival of its sovereign. Meanwhile, the black flames still blazed around her while her hairs fluttered erratically, making her look like a berserk demoness. Facing the Enzu beast-shaped Conrad, her battle spirit only soared. They turned into meteors and slammed against one another in a resounding boom. Then, they exchanged dozens upon dozens of moves. Yvonne's sword met Conrad's claws while she danced amidst waves of flames, water, and storms. They wantonly clashed, battling to their heart content, and bringing the satisfaction of orgasmic battle to the other's mind. Bang! Conrad's claw collided with Yvonne's sword. His claw broke, and her sword flew backward, falling onto the ground and dispersing in particles. Thrown off balance, Yvonne plummeted toward the ground, and unwilling to let go of this golden opportunity, Conrad pursued. But as he approached her to deliver the final blow, Yvonne flashed a wolfish grin. She wrapped her legs around his feathery neck, using it as support to lift herself up. No. Conrad realized his mistake, but it was too late. Shush. Yvonne locked his beak, lifting her head above his two. Bang. Headbutt him right in the middle of his forehead. The impact destroyed Conrad's transformation, and he reassumed his true form. But Yvonne didn't stop. Bang, bang, bang. Headbutt after headbutt. She hammered him as they dropped onto the ground. In an explosion of dust, they crashed with Yvonne sitting above Conrad, legs stretched around his neck while blood dripped from both their foreheads. Aarg. Conrad groaned with aching bones. According to my calculations, the count should be 647. Conrad, you lose. But inwardly, Yvonne felt otherwise. At the end of the day, although she lowered her cultivation level to his, she wasn't a true transcendent rank cultivator. A transcendent rank cultivator couldn't use divine physique's powers to this extent. A transcendent rank cultivator didn't have her sword and battle skills. If the her back when she just reached the transcendent rank replaced Conrad, to say nothing of fighting as equals, shouldering 100 moves was impossible. Therefore, she may not have lost the fight, but in the contest at the same level, she'd been utterly defeated. But she would never admit to it. At least not openly. Chapter 130 Sharing Secrets Part 1. As she sat on top of him, Yvonne's eyes peered into Conrad's, and she could see the unwillingness to concede shining within. What? Not convinced? Conrad was indeed not convinced. If he unleashed his lineage weapon, even 2 Yvonne wouldn't be his match. However, to say nothing of the consequences, Manbreaker might be his ticket to invincibility within this world, but its power didn't truly stem from him. It existed because of his father's blood and might. If he couldn't suppress the world without it, then, didn't that mean that once deprived of Tauratha's blood, he was nothing worth mentioning? Moreover, every single one of Tauratha's children had a Manbreaker. The scions of the other noble demon houses also had their lineage weapons, albeit of varying powers. Should he fail to grow out of his reliance on it, if he ever reached the higher realms, how would he stand out? As for this loss, he could only blame it on his lack of experience. Still, it didn't come without benefits. One fight with Yvonne brought him more results than several days against his semi-saint maids who not only couldn't fight him without scruples, but didn't possess a tenth of her battle experience. This defeat, he would accept. Let it be the first and the last. Yvonne, who'd been staring into Conrad's eyes, could barely stifle her laugh. For some reason, she particularly enjoyed that irritated look of his. She leaned in, lowering her face toward his while letting her nose almost brush his in a position any onlooker would have found compromising. "I'm not that much of a sore loser," Conrad replied while his inner conflicts dispersed. "Good. If you were, I'd be disappointed. Don't worry, being my friend comes with many benefits." Their faces were but an inch of one another, and as they spoke, their breaths intertwined. The more he stared into those slit silver eyes, the less Conrad cared about his loss. Instead, the urge to rise and kiss Yvonne's lips grew within him. Full, alluring, and at criminal proximity. Conrad couldn't resist the temptation, pushing his lips toward Yvonne's to seize the object of his desire. But as he reached them, she blocked him with her right index, stopping him less than an inch away from his prize while never losing eye contact. "Greedy," she whispered with her index still standing, protecting her lips which had curled into a gripping smile. "Yes, for you," Conrad spontaneously replied, unaware of the implications of his words. And between them, tension rose. "What you want isn't me. You want victory over my arrogance. The sweet taste of conquest, of taming the indomitable." Slowly, Yvonne pushed his face away from hers and stood up. "I don't know how many men like you I've seen back in those days. Women are like lambs. Their heart's the fleece you collect. Mine just happens to have a more dazzling color. Once I give it to you, for how long while you hold on to it?" Though her words weren't pleasing to the ears, Conrad was forced to admit that Yvonne hadn't lain. Still, he felt a tingling sensation in his chest. "I am selfish, haughty, willful, and cruel. What is there to like? Any man that claims to want me is either blinded by my sensual beauty, suffering from mental issues, or hiding ulterior motives. There has never been an exception." Hearing Yvonne's auto-description, Conrad almost burst into laughter. "I'm also selfish, haughty, willful, and cruel. Who is to say I'm not heaven's gift to you? Your predestined mate on the road of cultivation?" Yvonne shook her head and turned heels, feeling that Conrad was too shameless for his own good. "Why, heaven? Why can it not be hell? It's been a long time since I forsook heavens. In any case, follow me. It's time to inaugurate our new relationship." "Inaugurate?" Conrad was perplexed. However, he still stood up, following Yvonne back to her quarters. "Haven't you heard that all friendships start in liquor? I have a few special bottles bred for a moment like this one. Unfortunately, across all those centuries, no one was worthy of tasting them alongside me." Conrad's eyes almost popped out of his sockets. "Why are you so surprised? Even priests get drunk, to say nothing of me. With lifespans like ours, a few guilty pleasures are necessary to avoid going insane from boredom." Conrad had nothing to say against that. Once they returned to her quarters, Yvonne made a grasping motion, and a small pouch flew from one of her drawers into her hand. She lightly tapped it, making 2 gray bottles appear out of thin air. It didn't take a genius to realize the pouch was a space treasure. Yvonne threw one bottle at Conrad and kept the other for herself. "One for you, one for me." She then sat at a nearby table, motioning for Conrad to do the same. He sat before her, with his eyes moving from his bottle to hers. "No glass or anything. We're here to empty bottles. What need is there for glasses? Just drink to your heart's content." Yvonne removed her bottle's lid, then raised it toward Conrad. "A good fight, a good drink. This is how life should be. Cheers." "Very well, cheers." Conrad followed suit, removing his lid and knocking his bottle against Yvonne's. Then, in tandem, they brought the bottles to their lips and took a gulp. Before Conrad could even access the liquor's taste, he felt like hellfire had been unleashed within his mouth. The alcohol burned within his body, heating him to deadly temperatures while his chest wildly beat and his face reddened. Cough, cough, cough. On the contrary, Yvonne took down gulps upon gulps as if it was water and not a scalding beverage within her hand. The hell did you breed it with? Blood. What? But as confusion and stupor shone within Conrad's eyes, a searing pain burst within his chest and spread throughout his internal organs. Arg! He roared, unable to suppress the agony while veins popped on his forehead and his face further reddened. He sat cross-legged, gathering his cultivation to suppress the pain. But then, a shocking scene occurred. The berserk current spreading within him reached his meridian's location and slowly morphed into a brand new one rippling with tremendous power. This was a supreme meridian. With just a gulp of some odd wine, he had obtained a new supreme meridian? How could this be? As the meridian's condensation ended, the pain slowly subsided. In the meantime, Yvonne still enjoyed her drink, not paying any attention to Conrad's pain and stupor. You still have a bottle to finish. If your tolerance is this weak, how can we be drinking buddies? The night is young, and we still have many bottles ahead of you, she said between two gulps, then carried on with her drinking. For the first time in a very long while, Conrad didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He also didn't know whether he should carry on drinking or hug Yvonne, while potentially getting slapped in the process. This beverage was a treasure that could trigger world wars within the ancient crystal world. And she'd casually thrown it toward him? What Conrad didn't know was that although Yvonne's beverage was also a special cultivation liquor, it was completely different from his and didn't contain that unique ingredient. Before defeating the poison within her, she couldn't bear using such a precious resource on herself. Thank you. From now on, when in private, you can call me Yvonne. Yvonne replied, then took another gulp of her drink. Chapter 131, Sharing Secrets Part 2. Even if Conrad didn't know the origin of the beverage, its effect alone was enough for him to realize that it carried extraordinary secrets. That Yvonne was willing to offer it to him showed that she'd let her guard down. Yvonne, since you're this straightforward, I won't be polite. Conrad took the liquor bottle back into his hands to resume drinking alongside his new partner. This time, knowing what he was dealing with, he steeled himself, channeling his cultivation to refine the beverage as it slid down his throat. And indeed, he could feel the iron taste of blood concealed within, blood that carried alongside it tremendous power and could shred the bodies of those too feeble to endure it. The blood of a high-level sage. Recalling the Flame Mark's words, Conrad deduced that this blood belonged to the infernal cult founder, one of the few true demons to have descended onto the ancient crystal world. And as he refined it, his cultivation skyrocketed. Like cabbage, supreme meridians upon supreme meridians condensed within his body. And by the time he emptied the bottle, 5 new meridians had formed within him, giving him a total of 3 god meridians and 8 supreme meridians. However, although there still was substantial power within him, he couldn't condense the 12th. It was as if some superior force barred him from that threshold, suppressing him at the 11 count. But how could Conrad willingly accept such a fate? How dared anything bar his road to supremacy? He couldn't tolerate and wouldn't allow it. Revolving his 100-flower scripture, his eyes shone with purple light while similarly colored mist swirled around his form. The scenery around him changed, turning into a vast wasteland where fire and brimstone ran amok. Conrad's eyes rose to the sky, and there, the shadow of an indiscernible face appeared. Though no cultivation emanated from it, its presence alone was enough to make him feel like a tiny, not worth mentioning ant. He despised that feeling, but the irresistible suppression came from his very bloodline. He couldn't fight it. "Who are you?" he asked the indiscernible figure whose pressure weighed down on him. "I am the Overlord, the ruler of the infernal realm, sovereign of all demons within the multiverse. Your suzerain." A hoarse, authoritative, and booming voice echoed within Conrad's ears, piercing his eardrums. From the Flamemark and system, Conrad learned that 4 kings ruled the infernal realm, each governing his own domain. Dahlgren, the northern king of hell. Tauroth, the southern king. Asherah, the eastern king. And finally, Urzel, the Western King. On the surface, those four kings were independent and in times of peace with the celestial realm, they fought for dominion, ruling their realms as they pleased without having to answer to anyone. However, in truth, they did answer to someone. The Overlord. The Overlord had no name, his house known as the Overlord's house, and his power infinite. Although he didn't interfere in the political clashes of the infernal realm, his absolute domination of Hell's lives was unquestionable. But now, that Overlord stood before Conrad, and he couldn't understand why. 12 is perfection. Perfection is forbidden. If you insist on congealing the 12th meridian, you must cross my tribulation. Even a son of Tauroth is no exception. Conrad's heart was full of discomfort. It was as if the Overlord saw right through him, preventing any trickery from his side while effortlessly peering into his secrets. But if you choose to back off, I will let you return to your world and carry on with your life. Henceforth, within each transcendent level, you won't be able to condense more than 11 meridians. What is your choice? The transcendent rank was the realm of transformations, the foundation of all future achievements. If Conrad missed a step, never would he be able to make up for it. On the road to supremacy, such a flaw was intolerable. Therefore, he had no hesitation. Bring it on. Instantaneously, horrible black flames descended from the wasteland sky, earth, and every corner to shoot toward Conrad. Meanwhile, within the infernal realm's southern domain, a 9 meters tall man whose features were 80% similar to Conrad's sat on an amethyst throne with several succubi kneeling by his side. That man was the southern king of Hell, Tauroth, and at the moment, he peered into a mirror-like image, observing Conrad's every deed. Your Majesty, the Overlord's trials are nigh impossible to cross. Besides, the infernal kings and a scant few chosen, no one ever managed to surpass them. That boy was born in a mortal world and never experienced any of our house's training or baptisms. Are you willing to let your youngest perish in such a way? Asked one of the succubi by Taurotha's side. Only top infernal talents were qualified to face the Overlord's trials. Yet, among those that dared face them, 99 out of 100 would lose their lives. Having observed Conrad's progress until now, Tauroth was truly unwilling to let that diamond in the rough perish under such circumstances. How could that be? Getting such a son wasn't easy. How could I let him lose his life in such a vain manner? Tauroth had 9 children, 6 born of willfulness, and 3 from contracts. For those last 3, he had taken great cares and held profound expectations. And at the moment, Conrad was the one that showed the most promise. Who dared harm him? Tauroth stood up, stepping into the mirror, and crossing the multiverse to appear within Conrad's tribulation world. When his shadow appeared within the wasteland world, Conrad's eyes rose to meet him. However, he could only see his back. A tall, mighty back capable of shouldering all the woes in this world. The Overlord's indiscernible face showed no surprise. However, though still calm, its voice was full of gravity. Tauroth, do you dare interfere in my trials? The Overlord's voice boomed within the wasteland. Still, Talorth remained undisturbed. Overlord, besides lust, nepotism is what I'm best known for. Since my boy managed to reach this step, isn't it my duty to ease him onto the path of success? If I cannot even do this, how am I worthy of being the Southern King of Hell? Tauroth spread his arms, causing dark purple light to erupt from his body and collide with the incoming black flames in a titanic boom. But even as his dark purple light confronted the bulk of the Overlord's black flames, a few managed to spread toward Conrad, infiltrating his body. Aoarg! Conrad howled, wrestling against the most horrendous pain he'd ever grappled with in his life. But with Tauroth suppressing most of it, it didn't take long before he overpowered its onslaught and overcame the tribulation, causing his 12th meridian to morph within his body and shocking power to erupt from his form. Meanwhile, in the outside world, Yvonne had long since dropped her liquor jug, ready to stop Conrad's endeavor at all times. But as she eyed his body's changes, God-level force erupted from each of his pores, spreading throughout the room, and effortlessly suppressing even her. Could it be that he succeeded? But while assumptions ran rampant within her mind, Yvonne could also feel that the god-level force erupting from Conrad seemed to stem from some distant power. Was he truly the son of a god? Chapter 132, Sharing Secrets Part 3. While Conrad obliterated the infernal flames running amok within his body, Talroth still clashed with the Overlord. He made a grasping motion, causing the fiery red sky to shine in dazzling purple light. That light spread across all the corners of the wasteland world, and wherever it went, the infernal flames dispersed until only Conrad, Talroth, and the Overlord remained. Talroth, today you've broken the laws of hell. Tomorrow, hell will not forgive you. Your punishment shall be dreadful. Overlord, just like you, I'm from hell. I'm sure it can't bear harming me. Who could? Talroth jested, but his humor brought no smile from the Overlord's indiscernible face. In a twister of infernal flames, the Overlord vanished, leaving only Conrad and Talroth to remain. With Talroth having deflected 99% of his trial, Conrad didn't have anything to worry about. In such conditions, if he still couldn't succeed, then he might as well die. But while he successfully crossed the tribulation, his mood soured. He'd personally witnessed how that newcomer withstood the bulk of it for him. Without him, what would his result be? Death. Therefore, he couldn't feel any joy. Because once again, he was reminded that the road ahead still held many hurdles he wasn't fully prepared for. Thanks to the brief dialogue, Conrad knew to who he owed his life to. The southern king of hell, Talroth, his cheap father. The hardest debts to repay were those owed to close relatives. Conrad really didn't want to owe him anything. However, it was now far too late. Talroth could feel the unwillingness within his heart as he turned to face him. Seeing Talroth for the first time, Conrad was astonished. Because he looked 100% like the Flame Mark did when they met face to face. However, he quickly regained his composure. After all, the Flame Mark came from Talrotha's blood. For it to bear his appearance wasn't that surprising. What truly terrifying Conrad was that staring at Talroth, he felt a crushing suppression force stemming from his bloodline. As if in front of him, all lust demons should grovel and worship on bended knees, acknowledging his absolute dominion over lust. Disgruntled that I meddled in your trial? Conrad didn't reply because his face said it all. Good. I'd also be dissatisfied. Unable to cross a tribulation on your own, having to resort to external help, that is a shameful matter. Nothing to be proud of. Conrad's face contorted into an ugly grimace. But although you're barely satisfactory, you're still my son. I naturally couldn't look on as you lost your life to that old fogey. However, this is the first and last time you will receive my help on the road to godhood. From now on, you're on your own. Transcendent, semi-holy, holy, divine. In each of those ranks, should you prove yourself worthy, the Overlord will appear. It is both an opportunity and a scourge. Still, if you can cross all his trials, then when we meet again in hell, I won't be ashamed of calling you son. Talroth chortled while Conrad's lips twitched. What do you want from me? Conrad didn't trust in a selfless show of fatherly love, believing that Talroth must have his own ulterior motives. You're wary, good. Of my three mortal scions, the first is too haughty, the second too crafty. Only you are the right middle. Reach the limits of your potential, establish your dominion on this world, then return to the infernal realm as a deity to stand by my side. If you can accomplish that with the most absolute of foundations, then you will naturally know what I really want. Talroth replied, then vanished in a purple haze. Contact your mother as soon as possible. She holds for you my last gift. The scenery changed, and Conrad returned to Yvonne's chambers. Seeing the astonished gaze with which she stared at him, he concluded that while he crossed the Overlord's trial, his body underwent shocking changes that startled even her. Who did you meet? The Overlord or the Warden? The Overlord was the sovereign of all demons, while the Warden represented the same authority for Devis in the celestial realm. Having already concluded that he possessed at least one godparent, Yvonne wasn't asking him who he met, but the true nature of his lineage. Demon or Deva? The Overlord? Conrad directly replied, not hiding anything. You're not afraid that I will kill you on the spot? Previously, Conrad might have held that fear, but the more he analyzed the situation, the more he realized he misjudged it all. The Supreme Overlord physique belonged to the Overlord's house. According to the flame mark, Yvonne got it by refining a tremendous quantity of the infernal cult founder's blood. This, Conrad could understand. But what about the extreme dark physique? Especially the black flames Yvonne released near the end of their fight. Those were remarkably similar to the Overlord's infernal flames. Therefore, Conrad concluded that Yvonne's extreme dark physique also stemmed from an infernal house. And if that was her natal physique then, since you also face the Overlord, why should I be afraid? I'm just wondering, did you challenge him or back off? For a brief instant, Yvonne's eyes contorted into a frown. However, as soon as it came, it vanished. I suppose that wasn't so hard to guess, right? I also faced the Overlord. The ancestor of all winged serpents is the demon god Dulran, while my mother is the daughter of an infernal cult's faith elder. She was sent to the Holy Continent to swindle my father into submitting to the infernal cult through guile and trickery. I inherited my physique from her lineage. A pity that my father had no interest in the clash for merit between the infernal cult and celestial church. She's long since returned to the barbarian continent. Yvonne replied without an ounce of melancholy, as if her mother's abandonment held no weight on her. Her mother's true identity and the reason behind her disappearance had always been tightly kept secrets known only by her father and she. Why she so freely revealed it to Conrad was a mystery. But unlike you, I didn't challenge the Overlord, because I knew very well that I had no hope for success. Conrad didn't probe further, closing his eyes to complete his first fleshly transformation. Now that his meridians had reached the 12 count, he could finally take that step and officially break through the transcendent night rank. His 12 meridians shone with dazzling light, spreading their essence across his body and refining it from within. His organs, bones, and marrow underwent drastic changes, while in the outside, his flesh glittered in multicolor light, with similarly colored fog swirling around his body. Miraculous transcendence, Yvonne appraised. Since she also possessed miraculous transcendence, recognizing it brought her no difficulty. However, Conrad seemed to contain formidable hidden power that far exceeded hers at that level. As Conrad's fist fleshly transformation ended, Yvonne suppressed her cultivation to the first step transcendent night rank. Then, without warning, she threw him a palm strike. Undisturbed, Conrad reciprocated with a palm strike of his own. Their hands met in a thunderous clash. Yvonne was propelled into the air, crashing against the wall behind her while Conrad remained still, as unmoving as a mountain. Ouch! Chapter 133 Yvonne's Debts. Yvonne's body slid down the ground. With her original cultivation and physiques, she, of course, didn't experience much damage. The greatest wound was to her pride. Never had she expected that if they met blow for blow, at the same level, she could no longer receive one move from Conrad. Even if all the deities of the universe told her that such a thing would one day happen to her, she wouldn't believe it. But now it did. Her eyes rose to meet Conrad, who observed her with a distant look. I'd expected you to be gloating by now. In normal days, Conrad would indeed feel proud and elated. However, today, he realized all his achievements were not that startling after all. He didn't just lack experience. His foundation still was insufficient. Having seen his father firsthand, Conrad could easily feel the abysmal gaps standing between them. It wasn't just a difference in cultivation. Tauroth gave the impression that he was born supreme. Be it in constitution or bloodline, he stood at the peak of the multiverse. But what about him? Growth. He needed to grow at the fastest pace so that when he one day reached the higher realms, he could trample all talents beneath his heels. So that one day, no overlord could impose any trial on him. That across the multiverse, only Conrad stood supreme. And although his current achievements were insufficient, the road started here. Nothing worth mentioning. I will gloat when I can oppress you at full strength, he replied with a smile. Yvonne was satisfied. Right now, Conrad was still at the stage of diamond in the rough. Only when he fully polished himself and fulfilled his potential could he afford to look down on the world. Before that, all show of arrogance showcased immaturity. If she had half this level of clear-headedness back then, the current her would be much different. At the same time, picturing Conrad's future achievement, her mind overflew with expectations. After all, in the ancient crystal world's history, even among those that initially descended from the higher realms, no one managed to obtain 12 supreme meridians in any transcendent level. Conrad's unrivaled cultivation road now truly began. You're still far from that level, Yvonne replied while returning to her seat. Without further ado, she summoned 4 new bottles, pushing 2 toward Conrad while keeping 2 for herself. Seeing those 2 new bottles, Conrad's eyes widened in disbelief. You surely are generous. Are you sure you've not already fallen for me? This was wine brewed on the blood of a divine ascension stage expert. Each bottle roughly contained 0.5 liters of blood. Who could so wantonly squander it for a new acquaintance? Don't toot your own horn. Yvonne paid him no more attention, bringing her own bottle to her lips. But as Conrad reached for his, her voice once more echoed, stopping him in his tracks. From now on, you and I will fight and drink daily. Neither of us will resort to cultivation, using only fists, feet, and weapons. From then on, we will slowly increase the pace until you fully master your body and fighting skills. Conrad said nothing, grabbing his liquor bottle to resume drinking alongside Yvonne and condense new meridians. That night, they drowned in booze. On the next morning, they fought until the sun set and their legs gave out. Then they again drowned in booze. That regimen carried on for a week, at the end of which Conrad had unlocked 6 more God Meridians and condensed another 18 Supreme Meridians, thus completing another 2 transformations. He was now at the 3rd step Transcendent Knight rank. At the same time, he didn't let his spiritual cultivation stagnate, expending it through a steady intake of pills. Although it wasn't improving as quickly as his martial cultivation, it still reached the 2nd step of the Transcendent Priest rank. According to Yvonne's assessment, just through the power of his meridians, Conrad could obliterate the average 1st step semi-saint in a single blow. Meanwhile, though they didn't exchange many words, as they continuously fought and drank, the pair grew increasingly closer. Unwittingly, they built a form of codependence and allowed the other to become a necessary part of their daily routine. The outside world vanished, replaced by a new one where only Conrad and Yvonne existed. And even when their lips stood still, their eyes spoke 1,000 words. They didn't need any spiritual connection or artifice to understand each other. As the 7th day ended, the two again met within Yvonne's chambers to enjoy one of their usual drinking sessions. This time, however, they went farther than ever before, boozing until they turned into a pair of drunken sots. Yo, Hick Conrad, I gotta say that you've got no conscience. Having Hick freeloaded in my place for so long and gulped all my resources, shouldn't you Hick give me some repayment? Yvonne inquired while wrapping her right arm around Conrad's neck. Hey, Yvonne Hick, it's not like. There aren't ways for me to *Hick pay you back. We could start with my body. Conrad replied while leaning against Yvonne's chest. Bah, shameless, says the one going around dressed like a debauched belly dancer. What do you know? This is style. What other women don't dare do, I dare. If anyone dares look at me in an improper way, I dig out their eyes. Who dares complain? Even me? Since you're such a good boy, I can give you a pass. Let's call it the free improper stare quota. Yeah, Yvonne declared while patting Conrad's cheeks and nodding in approval toward her own words. Yvonne, I say you're too good a woman for that dog emperor. How did you let yourself get swindled by him? Bah. As if sobered by Conrad's words, Yvonne shoved him away, but then the world around her swirled, and she dropped onto Conrad's lap. It's not swindling. It's repayment. Repayment. Yvonne yelled while rubbing her head against Conrad's lap. Conrad didn't say anything, struggling to keep himself awake while passing his hand within her hairs. This all goes back to when I turned 15. Back then, I'd just broken through the Transcendent Priest rank and was half a step into the Transcendent Knight rank. However, with my family's resources, if I insisted on condensing Supreme Meridians, I was doomed to spend decades to centuries within the Transcendent rank, and how far I could go was uncertain. So, behind my father's back, I went to the Tower of Rebirth to seek a life-changing opportunity. At the time, Ulrich was a 500 years old fourth-step semi-saint. In the upper circles, his talent wasn't anything extraordinary, and his two elder brothers had already broken through the holy rank. But although his talent wasn't extraordinary, his cultivation was steady with a rock-solid foundation. More importantly, he had a heart of gold and was incomparably strong-willed. As Yvonne recalled the past, her wild moves stopped, while her eyes sobered. But she still remained on Conrad's lap. He was also my only friend, the only man that didn't see me as a stepping stone to success. When he learned that I departed for the Tower of Rebirth, he used his third prince status to embezzle half the imperial treasury. With a tiny portion, he opened gambling houses, brothels, and other scandalous businesses. Making his father, the previous emperor, believes that he robbed and squandered state funds to satisfy his vices. He was almost beaten to death. Chapter 134: Yvonne's Debts Part 2. With the rest of the money, he funded an expedition, hiring a large troop of mercenaries and equipping them with mighty black market artifacts to come rescue me in the tower. By the time the previous emperor realized his true purpose, he was long gone. He arrived in time to save my life, and together, we explored the Tower of Rebirth under the jeers of the two great powers, elite. Originally, we did very well, obtaining many benefits. However, by a stroke of luck or misfortune, we stepped into the Infernal Cult Founder's resting place. The Infernal Cult Founder was a divine ascension rank expert, just a step beneath godhood. Although his soul had been obliterated in his battle with the Celestial Founder, his corpse could endure an eternity. A humongous corpse that overflowed with terrifying quantities of high-level sage blood. That was my once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How could I hesitate? I dived in, triggering the assault of the dozens of concealed infernal souls guarding the corpse. To save me, Ulrich shouldered the brunt of their attack, absorbing the infernal souls in a desperate attempt to refine them, giving me the opportunity one needed to collect a large quantity of sage blood. As a paragon spirit, that blood was useless to him. But where many others would have chosen to save their hide, he still stood by me. A pity that heaven doesn't reward the good-natured. Though he managed to refine the infernal souls, they left an indelible mark on him, twisting him beyond repair. I even suspect that some still live in him. From then on, insatiable greed and lust for power drove his every step. I held the vain hope that the throne could satisfy his hunger, so I helped him seize it. I was terribly wrong. It only made it worse. Yvonne trembled, revealing a feeble side Conrad had yet to see. A century passed before he revealed to me that from those souls, he obtained profound knowledge and a formidable cultivation method that made talent irrelevant. Comprehending the first layer, his cultivation directly reached the peak of the semi-holy rank with his complete sublimation and heartlessness. 9 transformations in the transcendent rank. 9 sublimations in the semi-holy rank. In the semi-holy rank, cultivators chose a path to become their guiding principle and sublimate themselves in it. Conrad was well aware of that. Comprehending the second layer, across the centuries, he refined the souls of 1,000 newborns to establish his 3 pure selves and reach the true origin saint rank. Now with the third layer, he must oppose his Tao and bring back all forms of love in his life. Friendly love, romantic love, fatherly love, and filial love. Bring them to the pinnacle, then sever them all as his fate tribulation, and in one step, reach the peak of the tribulation stage. Friendly love, he chose Else. Romantic love, he chose Verena. Fatherly love, that's for Nils, Elmar, and potentially Adelar, the second prince. Filial love, that is, of course, his mother. Recover his humanity through them, turning them into his tribulations, then destroying them to forever erase it. Wrestling their fates, refining their souls, and hence becoming the Holy Flame Empire's #1 expert. Conrad was terrified. Didn't that mean that all those people were pigs being fattened with care for Ulrich's future rise? The more favor they received, the greater the danger they faced. Nils, Verena, Else, all of them were slowly being prepared for slaughter. And ultimately, this is all my fault. It is I who harmed him. If I weren't this selfish, if I weren't that greedy for a supreme foundation, none of this would have happened. Therefore, I must find a way to save him before it's too late. And if I cannot then, I must kill him myself. Yvonne whispered, then passed out on Conrad's lap. The concealed guilt festering within her heart had now been fully revealed, leaving no further secret to stand between them. But while Conrad could understand Yvonne's pains, he couldn't sympathize with Ulrich. Regardless of what the previous one was, the current one was an enemy that threatened his interests at every corner and whose existence endangered people he'd rather see unharmed. That being the case, he had to die. Conrad carried Yvonne back to her bed, softly laying her on her back while sitting at her side to observe that gripping face of hers. With determination shining within his eyes, he stood up, returned to his chambers, and stepped back into the system. 7 semi-saints were no longer enough to accommodate his EXP needs. It was time to bring back more. Of the 17 remaining, only one was tasked with helping Wolfgang in his endeavors. The rest mostly idled within the church's headquarters. Initially, Conrad wanted to keep them within the church to feed him information and coordinate with him at a critical juncture, but now he could no longer have such patience. As for the commotion brought by the sudden disappearance of 16 semi-saints, that would never be traced back to him. With a clap, Conrad brought the semi-saintesses into the space mansion and once more gathered his harem for a night of passion. His EXP count skyrocketed, breaking past the 1 billion barrier and reaching a whopping 1.019 billion. He exchanged 600 million to improve his primal physique to the awakened holy level, giving himself the means to treat Yvonne. Now, he only needed to breed the opportunity. Meanwhile, within the Emperor's palace, a rage-filled Ulrich reviewed late-night reports. Since the cracked incident, he'd met with many setbacks, most of those related to Nils. That unfilial daughter dared blame the death of her friend onto him, and even refused to acknowledge him as her father. Even after all this time in imprisonment, she still wouldn't relent. How dared she? He really wanted to dig up that cracked youth's grave and butcher him all over again. At his side stood a mid-sized, handsome, and refined paragon spirit youth whose feature, at a glance, bore many similarities with his. But while an amiable air swirled around him, Ulrich knew that beneath that mask of gentleness and refinement hid one of the imperial family's most sinister wolves. That man was his second son, Adelar von Jürgen. Behind them were 2 imperial eunuchs with profound cultivations who attended to them while they reviewed court reports. Adelar, you've always been my most sensible. A pity that Elmar didn't have half your wisdom. If he did, how could he fall into such dire straits? Eldest brother has his difficulty. His deed showed family love that warmed all of our hearts. On behalf of us brothers, I hope father will show some leniency. Adelar pleaded in a deep bow, and though outwardly he sighed in helplessness, inwardly Ulrich sneered. How could he not see what Adelar was up to? Don't worry, in a few months, once things have calmed down, I will find an opportunity to release him. However, his lack of consideration for the overall picture makes him unworthy of the crown prince title. From now on, I will be relying on you. I swear not to disappoint father's expectations. But at that time, an imperial eunuch spy Ulrich had sent to infiltrate Yvonne's palace rushed back into the hall, falling on his knees. Your Majesty, I have news. Chapter 135 The Emperor's True Self. Father, allow me to excuse myself. Your Majesty, allow us to excuse ourselves. Adelar and the two other imperial eunuchs offered before Ulrich could say anything. With a wave of his hand, Ulrich dismissed them, and they quickly stepped out of the hall. "What news do you have?" Ulrich asked his eunuch spy as soon as Adelar and the rest were out of sight. On his knees, the eunuch trembled. "Your Majesty, for the past week, Her Grace has been acting in suspicious manners. From morning to evening, she wards her entire courtyard through semi-holy force, preventing anyone from peeping while at night. She does the same to her chambers." 1 second, Ulrich was still a calm and stately emperor. The next his eyes went bloodshot while he gripped his chair's arm. Any variables potentially leading to this? As he proceeded onto the next part, the eunuch's entire body trembled. This coincides with the appearance of a new eunuch boy. Not long afterward, Her Grace's strange behavior began. "I haven't had time to investigate him yet, but I suspect—" Snap! Ulrich's chair's arm broke within his hand as the eunuch carried on with his words. "The gals." His true origin Saint Force erupted, barreling into the eunuch to obliterate his bones and severely damage his internal organs. The eunuch fell face first with blood gushing from his orifices. Wild with rage, Ulrich stood up, crossing the distance, separating him from the eunuch in a single step. "How dare you insinuate such a thing? How dare you slander my consort? Death, death, death. Your Majesty, mercy. I'm merely reporting my assessment as per your—" The eunuch stammered, terror-stricken, but it was too late. Ulrich's boot came crashing on his skull, grinding it into debris of bone, blood, and gore. Phew! Ulrich breathed in and out, regaining his composure. "Now that I killed him, how do I recognize the intruder? Hateful, incomparably hateful. Couldn't he die later?" Ulrich shook his head in disappointment. Finding good help nowadays truly was a daunting task. "Well, it's not that difficult a problem to solve. I just need to kill them all. Without male servants, is there still a problem?" Ulrich felt his reasoning made perfect sense and was about to head toward Yvonne's palace when he recalled he still had a lot of work to handle. "Tomorrow. I will kill them tomorrow. Tonight, we tend to the realm." As if nothing had occurred, Ulrich returned to his seat to carry on with his work. That following day, Yvonne awoke from her deep slumber, her head hammered by the hangover. However, with a simple rotation of her cultivation base, she dispelled it and stood up. Knock, knock, knock. Not long afterwards, someone knocked at her door. "What's the matter?" "Your Grace, His Highness, the Sixth Prince, asks for an audience." Hearing of Wenzel's arrival, Yvonne's face contorted into a frown. "I'm not seeing him. But what?" Yvonne snapped, terrifying the maid who still stood behind the door. "Since dawn, he's been kneeling in your courtyard and said he won't leave until you meet him." Though Yvonne's displeasure didn't decrease, her face softened. "Fine, bring him in." The maid left at breakneck speed, rushing back toward Wenzel to announce him the news. Without delay, he followed her back toward Yvonne's chambers where the maid left him. "Come in." Nervously, Wenzel opened the door and stepped in. Within the room, Yvonne's cold back awaited him. Immediately, he dropped onto his knees. "Mother, your son greets you," he exclaimed in a deep bow. For a moment, Yvonne said nothing, letting him bow on his knees while she still refused to face him. The current Wenzel was a far cry from the initial dashing imperial prince. His body was emaciated, and his face haggard. His mind had also undergone drastic changes. Thanks to Else, he didn't remember his clash with Conrad, thinking that he owed his current eunuch state solely to his father. Since then, he'd reflected on himself, only wishing to experience a life away from troubles and the cruelty of the imperial palace. However, no one believed in such a change, blaming his current deeds on his lack of manhood. More importantly, he realized that besides Yvonne, he didn't have anyone. "What do you want?" Yvonne asked, following her brief silence. "Mother, I want to beg for your forgiveness." Wenzel began while still not raising his head. "I know I'm an unfilial waste. I know I disgraced your name, forever staining your reputation through my shameful deeds, But mother, I hope you can forgive me. I hope you can look beyond the past and give me an opportunity to become the son you wished for. I know my wrongs. Mother, please forgive me. Wenzel begged in a kowtow. However, he couldn't move Yvonne. Although he was not her biological son, she'd raised him with painstaking care. Painstaking care he trampled on at any given opportunity, showing neither love, gratitude, or even a semblance of filial piety. Truly, a waste of effort. Now when the world crashed on him, he suddenly wanted a chance at redemption. Was there such a good thing in the world? Late, it was far too late. Get lost? Mother, I swear I. But before Wenzel could finish his words, Yvonne's cultivation erupted. I said, get lost. In this world, I do not have a son named Wenzel von Jürgen. Struck by her formidable aura, he flew out of her room, crashing back in her courtyard. With great pains, he struggled to get back on his feet. Mother, I will come again. Please take care. Wenzel bowed, then headed toward the servants' quarters to find a place to rest before leaving from whence he came. On the road, he passed by Conrad, who headed toward Yvonne's place, but thanks to Else, couldn't recognize him. As for Conrad, he simply didn't care enough to spare him more than a glance. Not everyone was entitled to second chances. But as Conrad headed toward Yvonne's quarters, bone-chilling killing intent covered her entire palace's domain, causing all its denizens to shiver. His Majesty, the Holy Emperor, arrives. An imperial eunuch announced as Ulrich reached Yvonne's gates. Chapter 136. Forgive me. A terrible, foreboding feeling jolted Conrad's heart as the eunuch announced Ulrich's arrival. With the killing intent bloating the sky, anyone could see that he came with malicious purpose, and his presence heralded a disaster. Conrad activated his invisibility skill, vanishing from the people's sight and staying out of reach of even a saint's senses. It was almost as if he'd vanished from the world, standing in a parallel dimension from which he could safely observe the events unfold. Hands crossed beneath his back, Ulrich stepped in. Wherever he went, eunuchs and maids would fall on their knees, greetings him as Your Majesty. He relished in that feeling, in that title seized on the corpse of his relatives. The billions of lives of the Holy Flame Empire all belonged to him. The only frustrating thing was the presence of all those eunuchs that swirled around his possession, and among them, there even was someone who had the nerves to frolic with her. How dared he? How dare they? Death, death, death. Gather all the eunuchs in the central courtyard. Do not miss a single one. Yes, Your Majesty. The two imperial eunuchs by Ulrich's side bowed and shot toward the various corners of Yvonne's palace, seizing one eunuch after the other. With their semi-saint cultivation level, capturing eunuchs that were not higher than the true knight rank was simplicity itself. The eunuchs were terrified, not knowing why the emperor's imperial eunuchs were specifically targeting them. However, they couldn't resist, and one after the other fell within the central courtyard. Dozens of eunuchs knelt on the ground, awed by the emperor's might. Your Majesty, all of the eunuchs have been brought to you. Is anyone missing? We've double-checked, not a single one. Good. Very good. Ulrich examined the eunuchs with rapt attention, trying to find something special in any of them. However, he couldn't find anything. TSS, 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 just a bunch of waste. Are any of you qualified to serve by my Yvonne side? Even dare have presumptuous thoughts. Kill. Ulrich waved, his hands, motioning for his imperial eunuchs to carry out the execution. Without hesitation, they turned toward the kneeling eunuchs, ready to execute them. Impudence. Vast pressure erupted from Yvonne's chambers, shocking the two imperial eunuchs and sending them spiraling into the air with blood spurting from their lips. Like a whirlwind, Yvonne shot into the courtyard, descending before Ulrich with overflowing wrath. Ulrich, what is the meaning of this? Arg, Yvonne, long time no see. I just received news that your personnel has recently been very lax and no longer knows the boundaries between master and servants, even taking a lot of your personal time? Ulrich began while strutting back and forth. Such a thing is naturally intolerable. Therefore, I decided to personally bring discipline back into the house. Yvonne bit her lower lips. She realized that one of Ulrich's spies must have escaped her grasp and observed her strange behavior in recent days. As for Conrad, who unbeknown to them stood on the side, he realized he was the cause of today's events. Those are my people. If they're wrong, I shall punish. Sentencing them is not up to you. What? You want to protect them? But the more you want to protect, the more I want to kill. Ulrich waved his sleeves, releasing a terrible conflagration that swallowed the dozens of eunuchs and turned them into charred corpses. No, it was too fast. With the proximity between Ulrich and them, Yvonne didn't have the time to make a move, that they'd already been roasted to death, their lingering screams and charred corpses being the sole reminders that they once were of the living. Arg! Without considerations, Yvonne released the full might of her cultivation, flying toward Ulrich with her sword summoned. TSS, TSS, TSS. Bad, bad, Yvonne. Ulrich rotated his hands, causing red light to swirl around them. As soon as the red light appeared, Yvonne tumbled onto the ground, with her entire body trembling and her tribulation poison flaring up. How could this be? She wondered in stupor. Ulrich was controlling her poison with a wave of his hand. Since when did he obtain such a skill? My blood is the nexus, and I myself at the threshold of the tribulation stage. It took some time, but I devised a way to trigger your poison at will. Now, whenever I want, I can make you wail. Ulrich raised his hand, allowing Yvonne's tribulation poison to fully erupt. Arg! Dark veins pulsated all across her body as she writhed on the ground. Yvonne, don't you remember? I'm your friend, your only friend. Why do you need others? Why do you grieve at their loss? I don't like it. I don't understand it. I hate it. Ulrich roared in a maddened frenzy. You belong to me. Don't worry. When I break through the divine rank, I will claim your body and consummate our wedding. But until then, you can only have eyes for me. Due to the overbearing energies of her supreme overlord physique, dual cultivating with Yvonne was impossible for anyone beneath the divine rank in terms of cultivation or physiques. Conrad's holy primal physique was one of the rare few exceptions. Ulrich knelt by her side, his demented glare peering into her wailing eyes. Unfortunately, I cannot love you. If I love you, I must kill you. If you love me, I must still kill you. Since we cannot have love, we should have hatred. Hate me, despise me, loathe me. At the same time, I want you to remember that my blood is both the remedy and source of your plight. That just like I can bring you misery, I can bring you delight. I want you to grovel and worship me in hatred, unable to escape my grasp. And when the time is ripe, I shall claim you, making you the sole witness of my road to supremacy. My eternal partner. Ulrich's hands trembled as he held Yvonne's face and roared like an unrestrained lunatic. You are insane. Yvonne spat with eyes full of contempt. Ulrich was too far gone. There was nothing left to do, and no way to save him from himself. He burst into laughter. No, my mind is clear. My objectives defined. Today you look at me with contempt, but who kneels? Who stands? Of those who look down on me, how many still breath? Father, dead. Brothers, dead. You, half-crippled. Soon enough, we shall add your father to the list. Yvonne's eyes now shone with killing intent. As for Conrad, who silently observed by the side, he'd already prepared himself to purchase a mid-level holy talisman and bomb Ulrich on the spot should he cross his bottom line. Ulrich seized Yvonne by the neck, hauling her up in the air. System, exchange. But before Conrad could finish, someone else rushed into the scene. Father, mercy. Wenzel rushed toward Ulrich, stumbling and falling on his knees by Ulrich's side. Father, if Mother offended you, it must not have been of her own volition. On behalf of our father and son bound, I ask you to please show leniency. Get lost. Please show mercy. Get lost. Mercy, Father. Ulrich's crazed eyes slowly descended onto Wenzel, who repeatedly kowtowed on the ground, unwilling to leave. If you don't get lost now, you will never be able to again. Hearing those words, Wenzel trembled. However, he still kept his now bleeding forehead onto the ground and asked for mercy. Zell, stop fooling around and leave at once. I already said, I didn't have a son like you. Yvonne struggled to say through her lips. However, those words kindled Ulrich's wrath. He could feel that behind her harsh words, clear concern remained. Intolerable, he dropped Yvonne onto one side and turned toward Wenzel, grabbing him by the shoulders. Tell me, why does she care about you? It's not allowed, it's forbidden. I forbid it. Father, There was grief in Ulrich's eyes as he stared into Wenzel's with soaring dementia and crushed his shoulders. Shush. Ulrich freed Wenzel's shoulders to now hold his cheeks. Little one, you must forgive Father. Father doesn't want to kill you. But who told her to love you? Father cannot tolerate it. Sorry. Please, forgive me. With a yank, Ulrich tore off Wenzel's head, separating it from his neck in a gruesome eruption of blood. No. Yvonne wailed, but to no avail. It was far too late. Father didn't want to harm you. Blame yourself. Blame her. Ulrich whispered into Wenzel's lifeless head with tears falling from his left eye, then tossed it onto the ground. He then turned heels and left. Chapter 137 Soulmates. Wenzel. Yvonne cried as she crawled toward Wenzel's corpse. Even if he disappointed her at every turn, he was still the son she raised across decades. How could she truly give up on him? To say nothing of the fact that he had just turned over a new leaf. The moment he chose to reject his past self and return to her as a worthy son, was also the moment heaven chose to take him away from her. Why? She couldn't believe it. Yvonne crawled toward his side, bringing together his head and body with a vacant look and crumbling heart. But while she inwardly wailed, falling under a myriad of inner daggers, the invisible Conrad didn't stay idle. Give me the lowest grade Arch Soul lamp available, at once. The system exchanged 100,000 EXP for a low-level Arch Soul lamp and sent it to Conrad. Soul lamps were known as incomparably evil artifacts used by demonic cultivators to trap the souls of their victims for future use. They could later then use them to power puppets or directly refine them through specific sorted arts. Conrad held no such design. With the soul lamp, he absorbed the lingering souls of Wenzel and the deceased eunuchs, safely storing them, then stepped toward Yvonne, who still wept over Wenzel's body. Seeing that despairing side of her, Conrad's heart tightened, as if an invisible force squeezed it from afar, stifling his breath. That sensation was awfully uncomfortable. Why save their souls? Those are low-level creatures, even by this world's standards. They will never bring you any ben. Shut up. Conrad silenced the flame mark, which once again attempted to direct him. They have no use for me, and I couldn't care less about them. But she cares, therefore, I will save. If you're not satisfied, go back to sleep. The flame mark said nothing more, returning to silence. Why Ulrich didn't seize Wenzel's soul was a mystery. However, he wouldn't dwell on that for now. And thanks to that mystery, he could grasp this opportunity to make things right for Yvonne. His invisibility skill dispersed, and he reappeared by Yvonne's side. Seeing the shadow suddenly emerging from her side, Yvonne's eyes rose to meet the one intruding on her grief, but was surprised to see Conrad's towering shape. In that instant, she couldn't consider why or how he suddenly appeared. Her only thought was to get him to scram. I don't know how you evaded the scrutiny of Ulrich's subordinates, but you should get lost. Joke. This whole thing had occurred because of Ulrich's suspicion of an illicit relationship. Yvonne finally realized that while her life was never at stake, anyone suspected of being favored by her would receive Ulrich's unrestrained retaliation. That being the case, how could she keep Conrad by her side? However, his reply startled her. I will not. Yvonne's red, teary eyes widened in disbelief. What is wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened to them? Are you that eager to die? Right now, to say nothing of others. With Ulrich having obtained full control of her poison, Yvonne could not even protect herself. Her future prospects were bleak, to say the least. Anyone with half a brain cell could see that. Why then would Conrad risk his life and bright future to stay by her side? Moreover, one thing Yvonne had left to say was that when she didn't see Conrad among the gathered eunuchs, she felt profound relief, as if losing them could not compare to losing him. That feeling shamed her. I just thought that since I have the solution to your grief, I couldn't just leave you behind, Conrad replied with a gentle smile, causing Yvonne's eyes to widen and her expectations to soar. However, as quickly as they came, they vanished, obliterated by the harsh reality of the dead bodies lying by her side. What kind of solution could you possibly have? Can you bring the dead back to life? Yvonne asked in spite. Conrad wasn't offended. Follow me, he ordered before heading back toward Yvonne's quarters. Knowing Conrad, Yvonne knew he wasn't the type to speak rubbish in moments like these. Therefore, she followed him back in. Conrad waved his hand, making the soul lamp appear, and rubbed it within his hands. Gray smoke sprang from within, carrying alongside them 24 dormant souls that soon filled the room. Those were the eunuch souls, and at their helm, Wenzel stood. Seeing the 25 souls standing before her, Yvonne's eyes went wide from fright. First, because she could see them. Second, because it was theirs. Without special cultivation methods and conditions, the ability to see souls didn't appear before the divine rank. Conrad could see them because of his origin sight. However, Yvonne normally couldn't. But thanks to the soul lamp's processing ability, that hurdle had been vanquished. Those are the 25 souls lost today. Right now, they're in slumber. 2 options stand before us. Either we wait to find suitable bodies for them, or we seal them within soul puppets, turning them into mechanical individuals with limited prospects. Soul puppets were unusual artifacts built with rare materials capable of containing souls. However, the soul couldn't be of higher rank than the puppet's materials and vice versa. Moreover, once the soul was installed, upgrading them was incomparably difficult since it involved upgrading the soul's level. But at the moment, Yvonne didn't care about any of that. She also didn't care about why Conrad possessed such an item, directly leaping onto his chest and holding his neck tight within her arms. Joy, deep, unparalleled joy welled within her chest and consumed her whole. Unable to restrain herself, she kissed Conrad's cheeks time and time again, marking him with the red of her lips. Thank you, thank you. Hey, thanks are all nice and good, but you gotta show some sincerity. How do you plan to thank me? Conrad teased while holding onto Yvonne's waist and staring into her eyes. For the first time in centuries, Yvonne didn't know what to say, and her cheeks flushed red. I can give you anything you want, Yvonne whispered. Being the son of a demon god, Yvonne didn't doubt Conrad had the means to handle what she had to offer. Therefore, she made that impish proposition. However, Conrad, of course, didn't want a transaction. Since Ulrich had worked so hard to bring her to hell, it was now his turn to lift her back to heaven and seize the beauty for himself. I'd rather we dance. The words took Yvonne aback. Alongside fighting and drinking, dancing was one of her favorite activities, one she was always dressed for. However, she'd never expected Conrad to share in such a hobby. In the week they'd spent together, he never revealed such an interest. Still, she readily agreed. Very well, I hope you won't disappoint me. Perhaps Conrad would again surprise her, throwing her heart out of control with a few moves of his own. Effortlessly, he occupied a greater spot than anyone ever did, one beyond what Ulrich held in the past. Beyond the boundaries of friendships, he occupied her heart. As for Conrad, although he'd yet to put a name on it, he understood that among all the women he'd met, Yvonne held a special place. Standing by her side, he felt at ease. Only she truly shared similarities with him. With her, he didn't have to pretend. He didn't have to swindle. He could just be himself, and it would all work out. The connection they shared was that natural. Having never experienced such a feeling, Conrad couldn't forsake it. The wind was the melody, and their hearts the rhythms at which they danced. As their improvised ballet reached its end, Conrad stared into Yvonne's eyes and her in his. The building tension and electricity reached a crescendo, and Conrad took her lips into his, to which she reciprocated by tugging on his collar and yanking him toward her in a passionate kiss. As their tongues intertwined, Conrad swept Yvonne off her feet and, while still keeping her flaming lips on his, led her to bed. Moving on instinct, she tore him out of his clothes while he did the same to her. They exchanged caresses, but as their lips separated, she placed a hand on his chest, stopping him in his tracks. "I want to see your true form," she declared, causing Conrad's lips to curl into a devilish smile. "As you wish." Conrad leaned back. His pearl-white skin assumed a pale gray hue, while long claws sprang from his fingers and toes. His eyes both turned full violet, leaving no white within, while his hairs extended beneath his back, reaching his calves. Large goat horns sprang from his forehead, and from his back grew a pair of gray flesh wings that looked larger than his body. And of course, mighty demonic energy erupted from his form, filling the entire room with his pressure as he leaned toward Yvonne. "Which one do you prefer?" Conrad asked while his elongated tongue moved onto Yvonne's bare breasts. "This is truer," Conrad agreed. His current form was like a reflection of his true self, that of a depraved demon spawn. Yvonne's erect nipples poked his lips as he teased her breasts, the passion between them increasing while he trailed her divine body with his tongue and lowered it toward her flower bud. As if to accommodate him, Yvonne laid on her side while spreading open her legs for Conrad to get better access. Truly, she was unlike any others. Even in her first time, she excelled, not willing to show inferiority and meeting his fiendish gaze with fiery passion. Conrad also laid on his side, and as he approached her Yvonne's snatch, his shaft hardened. His lips met with her flower bud, his tongue tasting some of the sweet nectar that already dripped from it before he flicked it upward, sending a jolt of electricity throughout her body. "On!" Yvonne moaned in a soul-stirring noise that spurred Conrad on. Hungrily, he kissed and devoured her snatch, exploring it with his demonic tongue that forked and morphed at will to attack the pleasure spots it discovered and bring sublime pleasure. The pace between Yvonne's moans quickened. She locked her slender legs around Conrad's neck while he stroked her soft thighs and let her crumble under the pleasure. Unable to resist, she squirted within his welcoming mouth. That's not fair. How could she lose a battle so miserably? In the future, where would she put her face? Unwilling to admit defeat, Yvonne seized Conrad's erect member, first giving it a few pumps as if to assert its state, before dropping onto it with her mouth open wide. Slurp. She swallowed it in, gulping it like an avid beast and making up with enthusiasm what she lacked in skill. Like that, they fought, seeking to bring the other to blissful surrender. A pity that in this field, Yvonne's experience was inexistent. How could she contend with Conrad? Therefore, she resorted to more bestial means, using her winged serpent blood to elongate her tongue and wrap it all around Conrad's shaft, squeezing it in delight as she went up and down. "Oh!" Conrad groaned, taken by surprise. A fast learner, Yvonne took him all the way to the hilt, squeezing him down his throat and causing his milk to erupt within her throat. Her cum-stained lips flashed a victorious smile as she switched her gaze onto Conrad. "Don't be too full of yourself." Conrad's shaft glittered in golden light as he spun to face Yvonne. Startled by the sudden change, she recoiled, while Conrad crawled toward her, covering her with his towering body and wings while aligning himself with her sacred entrance. Conrad dived in, breaking through the hymen and settling himself within Yvonne. She stifled a pained yelp, but as Conrad's light spread within her, pleasure erased all feeling of ache. She stared into his eyes, he stared into hers, and although they said nothing, their stares said the same thing. "From now on, and throughout eternity, you are mine." Yvonne wrapped her arms around Conrad's neck, holding onto it while he used his right hand as support on the bed to lift her with his rod and take her midair. With his left, he held onto her waist, driving into her marvelous snatch that squeezed him in ways he'd never experienced beforehand. When she adapted to his rhythm, he increased the pace, taking her harder, faster, harder, and even faster, until their grunts and moans oppressed the walls, and he erupted within her. Chapter 138, Tribulation Poisons Destruction. As the first wave ended, the mating pair carried on, shifting their positions so that Yvonne sat on Conrad's crotch with her legs wrapped around his waist and her arms still locking his neck. Meanwhile, Conrad crossed his legs beneath her thighs, holding Yvonne's round, perky but within his hands. In that lotus position, thrusting became more challenging. However, intimacy increased several folds. Holding eye contact, Yvonne leaned back, allowing Conrad to grind against her G-spot while she rocked against him. She cupped his face within her hands, kissing him with unrestrained passion and moaning within his lips. The mental connection established by Conrad's 100-flower scripture allowed the two's pleasure levels to break through new barriers as they indulged in the other's embrace. Yvonne then broke their stalemate, shoving Conrad onto the bed and keeping his back pressed onto it as she stared into his purple eyes. "Now it's my turn to fuck you, silly," she declared, before starting her wild ride. Holding his hands within hers, she rode him with reckless abandon, pushing the limits of what her body could bear to slam her supple rear on his rod and let the sound of his balls kissing her ass cheeks fill the room. The intensity of their bestial mating had already transcended what any mortal could endure. They devoured one another with sublime passion, shifting positions to contend for supremacy. Conrad spun Yvonne onto her back, pile-driving her into a succession of orgasms while his purple-white spunk filled her gripping fold. Driven by primal instincts, they lost the notion of time, carrying on for an entire day and completely forgetting about the presence of the souls in the vicinity. Meanwhile, Conrad's cultivation rose at breakneck speed, his holy primal physique and 100-flower scripture allowing him to connect Yvonne's meridians to his, and use the energy released by their dual cultivation to unlock God meridians and condense new supreme meridians. 3 new God meridians and 9 supreme meridians appeared within him as the barbaric breeding carried on. Ooh-hoo! They grunted in tandem as their last orgasm hit them. At that time, golden light erupted from Conrad's holy primal physique, binding their souls and causing the two to lose consciousness in their partner's arms. The light didn't fade, wrapping the two of them while the scenery they saw changed. Conrad arrived in a world of pure darkness, with nothing as far as the eyes could see. In that world, negativity overflew, with feelings such as pain, regrets, and apprehension holding sway over all others. This was a specific corner of Yvonne's soul, the one in which the spiritual root of her tribulation poison lied. Several screens then appeared before Conrad, swirling around him while displaying various events that caused Yvonne a certain amount of pain or regret. One, in particular, swirled in bright red light. Conrad's eyes rose to observe it, and what he saw allowed him to understand where he stood and what he should do. Golden light again erupted from him, coating his bare body as he extended his hand toward the screen. When his fingers reached it, he vanished, reappearing in another location where darkness still reigned. Here, however, there were other people present. No, it was more accurate to call them memories. Memories of an event that was continually being replayed within this corner of Yvonne's soul. Sword in hand, Yvonne released the terrifying cultivation of a true origin saint, and with one move, beheaded the 2 eldest von Jürgen princes of the previous era. Terror and indignation shone within their eyes as their heads flew and life left them. The Saint Elders of House von Jürgen arrived a step too late. Still, they attempted to avenge the princes, but with one hand, Yvonne suppressed them on the ground. A tall, emaciated paragon spirit then appeared within the air, his old age made evident by the many wrinkles on his face, and his silver hairs that had lost the luster of youth. He was House von Jürgen's topmost expert, a more than 9,000 years old peak-level cross-tribulation saint, and Ulrich's great-granduncle, Adelwin von Jürgen. The average lifespan of saints was of 10,000 years. Because Adolwyn approached his death, he rarely made an appearance, desperately seeking the road to the star-taming stage. Moreover, the era of Ulrich's father could be considered a new golden age for the von Jürgen dynasty. The emperor was mighty, the heirs outstanding, talents rose in abundance, and the future seemed incomparably radiant. A pity that Gerhard condensed a tribulation poison, which Ulrich then used to infect his father right before he could break through the cross-tribulation saint rank, thus causing his destruction. Ulrich then played the debt and guilt cards to convince Yvonne to help him seize the throne and slay his brothers for him, thus ending the Radiant era. Yvonne and Adolwyn battled in the Imperial Palace's sky, shocking all audiences. But even with the gap of 3 saint ranks, he couldn't suppress her. The fight ended with both mutually wounded. What happened next, Conrad already knew. But the scene of Yvonne beheading the 2 princes kept replaying before him. He extended his finger toward it, causing strands of golden light to soar and destroy it. A new Yvonne then appeared before him. This time, she knelt with the 2 dead princes floating around her with grief and indignation written on their faces. Yvonne, why did you kill us? We had no enmity. Ulrich's life matters, but ours doesn't. If he wants to rebel against the natural order and become emperor, we must die? Why? 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 As they spoke, red light threads flew from their lips, binding the kneeling Yvonne who shivered under their accusations. Give us back our lives. In her life, Yvonne had killed innumerable people, but most of those lives were taken during wars with the northern barbarian kingdom and used to sharpen her sword. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that thousands had lost their lives to her. However, that was war. And if you don't die, I perish situation. There was no need for regret. In this case, it was different. Impossible to justify and therefore hard to erase. Why did I kill you? Why? It was not necessary. It was not worth it. Why? Conrad stepped forward, the golden light shining around him, spreading within the area to form a small bright zone within the darkness. He then placed his hand on the kneeling Yvonne's shoulders, ignoring the images of the 2 princes. Conrad, what are you doing here? The kneeling Yvonne asked his consternation while shifting her gaze toward Conrad. I'm here to give you the answer. Conrad replied with a gentle smile. What is the answer then? Why did I kill them? What's the justification? No justification. You killed them because you wanted to, because they stood in your way. Conrad's reply caused Yvonne's eyes to widen in astonishment. Someone's death serves your purpose? Kill. Someone stands in your way? Kill. Someone's death makes you feel good? Kill. Justification matters not. Anyone whose death serves you in any way, shape, or form deserves to die. That is who we are. If we want something, we take it, and if you block our path, you shall perish. We do not stand for righteousness and are driven by our selfish hearts and desires. Remember, we do not cultivate to be virtuous. We cultivate to make our will supreme. All profanities are correct if they please us. All righteous deeds are incorrect if they displease us. Right and wrong matter not, only our will does. Conrad's light spread into Yvonne's body, shattering her bindings while her eyes shone with enlightenment. Right, how could I forget? I'm Yvonne Voigt, and the world is my oyster. Why should I give you a reason? If I killed you, then you deserve to die. How dare you haunt me? Yvonne stood up, her eyes shining with tyrannical willpower. She threw a palm strike, causing bright golden light to erupt and extinguish the 2 princes. Since you can't rest in peace, let me kill you one more time and make sure you can never rise from the grave. The 2 princes vanished, and the darkness crumbled, replaced by a world of light. Yvonne then turned toward Conrad, whose face shone with contentment. Come, our reign of absolute domination will not build itself on its own. As he spoke, Conrad extended his hand toward her, which she took with an enchanting smile. They then vanished from Yvonne's soul to return to the real world. Chapter 139, The Harem Gathers Part 1. Back within Yvonne's chambers, the pair's eyelids trembled, and in tandem, they awoke. Conrad rolled onto his back, while Yvonne rose into a seated position with her legs crossed while her hands rested on her thighs. Dazzling golden light still swirled around her form, now suppressing the physical part of the poison. Conrad stood up, recalling the dormant souls into the soul lamp before hiding it within his space pouch. He then turned toward the meditating Yvonne, who fell into a deep trance while the remains of her poison crumbled. At the same time, Conrad could feel her cultivation steadily increasing. Leaving her to complete her healing process, he sat crossed-legged to achieve his fourth fleshly transformation and third soul transformation. Time flew by in a flash, during which the pair's cultivation rose to new levels. Conrad completed his 2 transformations, and with the remaining energy of the dual cultivation, proceeded with the 4th soul transformation, thus stabilizing himself at the 4th transcendent knight and priest ranks. Meanwhile, Yvonne completed erased the remains of the tribulation poison. The golden light vanished, replaced by pure white light as a complete saint ring formed above her head, and 9 pairs of white wings appeared at her back. Within the saint ring, a lotus grew and bloomed, releasing an immaculate feel that put the mind at ease. Once it fully blossomed, it vanished in a light whirlwind to reappear by Yvonne's side. However, its shape had changed entirely, assuming a human form that looked 100% like Yvonne. This was her first pure self, the proof that she'd officially returned to the holy rank. However, her cultivation stopped at the rising saint rank, not going a step further. Her eyes opened, revealing certain frustration. "What's wrong?" Conrad asked, feeling her irritation. "Although the poison has been eliminated, my body and soul haven't fully recovered. It will take some time for me to return to my past peak," she replied. However, at that time, her lips curled into a smile. "But when I do, and my foundation is re-established, I can directly reach the cross-tribulation saint rank, leaping through 3 ranks. 300 years ago, Yvonne was at the true origin saint rank. She took 15 years to go from rising saint to profound saint, and 35 to go from profound saint to true origin saint. If her speed didn't dwindle, it would have most likely taken her 3 to 4 centuries to reach the cross-tribulation saint rank. Soon, she would make up for the time lost. How long do you think you need to return to the peak? 2 to 3 months. Conrad was satisfied. Naturally, he didn't intend to rely on Yvonne's strength to take over the Holy Flame Empire. That was something he would do with his own hands. While she recovered her strength, he should work twice hard to improve his. Am I right to assume that you never went to the Tower of Rebirth? From their many interactions, Yvonne had long since concluded that Conrad's means had nothing to do with the tower. He must have some other secret that fueled his rise. However, she didn't probe on that topic. "Right, I never did. Nor do I intend to. At least not for the time being." The only thing worth Conrad's time within the Tower of Rebirth was the blood of divine rank experts. Such a treasure held innumerable uses and could let his faction's strength skyrocket in the shortest of times. As for the rumored god artifacts, if Yvonne didn't find one on the infernal cult founder's body, they most likely didn't exist. Yvonne's blood stash was limited, and he couldn't just rely on it. A pity that at his current level, getting the attention of the Celestial Church was, at best, a terrible idea. As for the infernal cult, Conrad didn't trust them either. They may worship the demon gods and desperately wish to obtain a ticket back to hell, but that didn't mean they were all willing to serve a teenage boy, demon prince or not. Among those divine rank elders and ancient clans, how many would pay allegiance to him? That was unknown. It was already good if they didn't try to devise ways to rob his bloodline. Yvonne understood Conrad's concerns. Besides blood, many wondrous treasures are hiding in there. Moreover, the core locations of the higher levels shift place every month, making relying on the knowledge of predecessors virtually useless. Therefore, across the ages, the tower's accumulations have reached a terrifying level. With your foundation, when you reach the semi-holy rank, you should be able to plunder it all without much effort. At that time, anyone that sees something they shouldn't can easily be put to death. Conrad agreed with that reasoning and was likely to follow that script unless some drastic event forced him into the tower. That aside, isn't it time for me to meet your partners? Yvonne asked with a smile Conrad found relatively worrying. Thanks to their recent tussle, Yvonne had identified Conrad as a dual cultivator and sex demon. That being the case, how could he not have other partners? She really wanted to see what that lot was made of. It is indeed about time. However, aren't you jealous? Jealous for what? Since I've arrived, they're doomed to fade into the background and become side characters. It's already good if they're not jealous of me. What need do I have to be jealous of them? The confidence with which Yvonne spoke didn't take Conrad by surprise. This was her style, looking down on all things under the blue sky. Well then, let's meet your new sisters. Conrad waved his hand, bringing the two of them into the space mansion where the harem gathered. During those 2 weeks he'd spent in Yvonne's palace, Jasmine had made the acquaintance of her sister rivals and sympathized with a few. However, when Conrad asked the harem to gather within the space mansion's main hall, she was still astounded. She might have already been aware of their numbers, but having them all gather in one place was a whole other matter. 47 beauties stood side by side, awaiting Conrad's arrival. Right, 47. And that wasn't even all of them because, in the church, Conrad still had 103 transcendent-level inquisitresses, while Wolfgang was still being helped by one of his semi-saint inquisitresses. And of all those women, not one wasn't outstanding in beauty. During their time in the space mansion, those women had formed their own factions, chiefly divided in two. On the one hand, we had the high cultivation, low-status faction composed by the semi-saint inquisitresses, and on the other hand, there was the low cultivation, high-status faction composed of Ileana, Jasmine, Daphne, Zamira, Phaedra, Aliki, and Freya. Those had been with Conrad for much longer and were held in higher regards due to their time by his side, achievements, or the trust and affection he graced them with. The rest didn't dare form a faction but sought to rely on either camp. Those two factions didn't dare contend for supremacy yet. However, they were still wary of one another, fearing one ogling Conrad's attention and depriving them of his touch. That was a cardinal sin and would trigger an all-out war. Fortunately, Conrad's demonic stamina was unparalleled under heavens, and he could shoulder the task of sating them all. Chapter 140 The Harem Gathers Part 2. Why did Conrad gather us all in the main hall? Such a thing has never happened before. Jasmine asked toward Ileana, with whom she'd formed an alliance to suppress the other party. I wonder too, could it be he wants to orgy here? Ileana replied. Conrad only gathered his women en masse for orgies. Therefore, she made such an assumption. The main hall is not a place Conrad would conduct an orgy in. He must have an important announcement. Zamira inferred, causing the others to nod in approval. Daphne's thoughts were much more straightforward, thinking that she should find an opportunity to slip into Conrad's pants once they were done here. At that time, the sound of footsteps echoed within the hall. In tandem, the ladies turned toward their origin and were surprised to see Conrad stepping in with a new woman by his side. Conrad standing with a new woman was by no means a strange sight and shouldn't have provoked much of a commotion. However, the dreadful aura of martial force and unrestrained killing intent coating that woman made her impossible to ignore. With riveting beauty, unmatched sex appeal, and shocking overbearingness rippling in her eyes, she truly was an eyesore. The two bypassed the gathered harem members, stopping at their front. I've gathered you all here today to present you your new sister. Conrad began, causing brows to furrow. Of all the harem members, not one was introduced in front of the entire team. If this wasn't a show of favoritism, what was? The likes of Jasmine and Ileana were finding this hard to accept. However, as the members of the high cultivation, low-status faction stared at Yvonne, their eyes gradually widened and soon shone with fright. Why Yvonne Voigt? Hell stammered while taking a step backward. Any one of the semi-holy inquisitresses was many centuries old. Therefore, They had lived through Yvonne's era and either witnessed or heard of her glory. Even after all those years, in spite of the mutual cover-up conducted by Ulrich and the Holy Flame Church, that prestige was hard to shake. Moreover, according to their intel, she'd only fallen back to the 9th step semi-holy rank. Let's not even mention that none of them were anywhere close to that level. Even if they were, with her earth-shaking foundation, how could they contend? The members of the low-cultivation, high-status faction were perplexed by their competitors' fright. Could that woman be that terrifying of a character? But when the names settled within their minds, their thoughts varied. Noble imperial consort, Yvonne Voigt. Hubert Voigt's daughter? Those were the words that rung within the minds of Ileana, Daphne, Zamira, and the rest of their faction. Nowadays, those titles were what people kept in mind when they heard of Yvonne's name. Conrad's gals truly knew no limits, even daring to lay hands on such a problematic character. As for Jasmine, who remembered Elsa's words, she frowned. It seems the holy consort was proven wrong. He did get her. As Conrad and Yvonne stood side by side, there was a form of chemistry easily palpable by onlookers, making them look like a perfectly matched couple. Not many of those present didn't find that irritating. The peaceful days were over. A threat had appeared. Conrad enjoyed the effect. I see that some of you are already acquainted with her. Good, very good. That being the case, I won't say much. Yvonne's cultivation and experience both transcend that of anyone present. Therefore, from now on, she will serve as the harem's leading member, my head consort. Seeing her is seeing me. I hope you behave. Those words threw the gathered ladies into an uproar, and Conrad certainly didn't hope that they behaved. Through those recent days by Yvonne's side, he understood an important principle. If his women couldn't defend themselves, the future was worrying. While they were by his side, there was, of course, nothing to worry about. However, what if they weren't? What about those moments when they stood alone in the outside world without him to look after them? Although they'd all received formal training at various stages of their lives, of the 47 women standing before him, only one possessed profound fighting skills. Zamira. As a former barbarian chieftain, Zamira had been through many battles, be it to take her position, or in the clashes against the Holy Flame Empire. Therefore, her fighting skills were top-notch, and becoming Wolfgang's consort didn't make her stop her training routine. As for the others, their skills varied, but their cultivation improved fast while their skills didn't. At this rate, they would reach the divine rank, with less battle skill than the average semi-saint general and rely on high cultivation to bully the weak. That was something Conrad didn't want to see. Every single one of his future goddesses should be a Valkyrie, capable of effortlessly shredding men of the same level, and engrave fear in the hearts of those that crossed their path. Therefore, it was time to squeeze their fighting spirit. And who better for this task than Yvonne? And as expected, not many were satisfied by this arrangement. She has just arrived, and in seniority is the youngest members of us all. Why should we listen to her? Jasmine opposed with firm determination. And although she said nothing, Conrad could see that Ileana agreed. What do you think of them? A smiling Conrad asked toward Yvonne, who appraised her sisters in silence. The best are barely passable, the worst are clearly wastes. Those words triggered the ire of all the opposite women. The nerves. Who do you think you are? Just a woman that fell to pleasure and forsook her husband out of greedy lust for a man young enough to be her great-grandson's great-grandson. What gives you the right to act arrogantly here? Ileana roared, failing to realize that her words applied to too many, her own mother included. Therefore, she received odd glances from all parties. However, she didn't care, glowering at Yvonne with intense animosity. The right of might, Yvonne replied, her words carrying a formless force that suppressed both Jasmine and Ileana from all sides. Conrad stood back to enjoy the rest of the show, for knowing the likes of Jasmine and Ileana, he knew exactly what their next words would be. If your cultivation weren't higher than ours by so many ranks, you wouldn't be able to act unruly. And there it came. Hearing those words, Yvonne's lips curled into a devilish smile. Oh, very well. If any one of your lot can receive one of my blows at the same level, I will willingly surrender the head consort position and apologize. Those words caused the members of the low cultivation, high-status faction to feel shamed. Wasn't this naked humiliation? However, the members of the high cultivation, low-status faction had oddly fallen silent. Joke. Yvonne battled House von Jürgen's #1 expert to a standstill while being 3 ranks below him, and that was a saint-level confrontation. Fighting her at the same level was no different than asking for humiliation. Unfortunately for them, Jasmine and Ileana didn't have that knowledge. You're going too far. Do you really think yourself unparalleled in the world? I've never seen such a conceited purr. But as Ileana began her bout of fury, she realized she'd indeed seen such a conceited person before. That person was standing right behind Yvonne. Not in the world, just when the bar is set this low. Do you accept the challenge, yes or no? With a glance at the rabble, Yvonne perfectly understood Conrad's intentions. Were it not for his desire to stimulate them, he would have never introduced her in such a pompous manner. That being the case, there was no harm becoming public enemy #1 and a new source of motivation. Yes, why not accept? Bring it on. Jasmine roared and stepped forward as soon as Yvonne released her of her pressure. The demonic energies of her half-succubus blood erupted alongside the purple light attribute of the 100 Flowers scripture as she shot toward Yvonne alongside 2 afterimages. 6-step Grand Knight, 6-step Grand Priest. Okay. Yvonne lowered her cultivation to Jasmine's level, and as Jasmine approached, her hand jerked forward in a palm strike. Jasmine flew back, landing on the ground, defeated. How can this be? With the purple light attribute, Jasmine's speed was not what the average Grand Knight could follow. However, Yvonne not only effortlessly trailed her move, but found the most critical flaw in her guard to defeat her in a single blow. Anyone else? Chapter 141. A name that suits you. As Jasmine dropped onto the ground, silence submerged the scene. Although the members of the low cultivation, high-status faction didn't expect her victory, they'd also not expected this miserable loss. And as they exchanged worried glances, they realized none of them held the confidence to fare better. The former church semi-saints were undisturbed by such a result. If that little girl could really exchange one move with Yvonne, they didn't mind cutting their own arms. Truly, newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. Forget about her. It's said that the Celestial Church's prime disciple, the current Holy Continent #1 talent, couldn't take 30 of her moves at the same level. But back then, his true cultivation was much higher than hers. When even he was faced with such an abysmal gap, a little girl with low cultivation and inexistent battle experience dares take such a gamble. Laughable ignorance. Hell commented, knowing that anyone that dared step forward was asking for a beating. Moreover, she didn't mind surrendering to Yvonne, whose cultivation, background, and talent were all leagues above hers. Unlike those little girls who only had prettier eyes and more opportunities. Ileana realized Yvonne wasn't someone they could trifle with. However, acknowledging the opponent's superior might was one thing, conceding was another. If they were suppressed in such a brutal manner on the very first day, how could they raise their head in the future? My turn. Ileana roared and stepped forward. Behind her, Zamira frowned. She could see the real purpose behind Conrad's deeds and supported it. Competition stimulated growth. Without a distant goal driving them onward, those girls would never improve. Moreover, their possessiveness threatened the harem's stability and could evolve into something different if left unchecked. Past today, the high cultivation, low-status faction would collapse and turn into Yvonne's obedient sisters, thus causing a seismic power shift that would, in turn, destroy the remaining camp. At the same time, the likes of Jasmine and Ileana would redouble their cultivation and skill training efforts to catch up to this unattainable existence standing before them. Not everyone cared about factionalism. Zamira didn't. Neither did the likes of Daphne, Phaedra, and Aliki, who were content just staying by Conrad's side. If Yvonne could suppress those two with absolute might, then peace would once more return. At least, until either reached her level. Then they could fight again. But if such a time ever came, and it most likely wouldn't, they would have long since matured into accomplished individuals able to grasp the bigger picture and make concessions. Meanwhile, Conrad inwardly laughed. More than anything else, he found that whole faction thing amusing. Of the gathered women, all had been contracted, and therefore, their minds were open books for him to browse while their very fate existed within his hands. They couldn't sin without his permission, and with a thought, he could erase what he disliked. What was there to be afraid of? As for Jasmine and Ileana, they also knew that although they possessed the partnership of equals, Conrad could demote them at any times should they breach the contract. That being the case, there were things they would never dare. More importantly, he knew their real nature. Said plainly, those two were good persons. Backstabbing and scheming didn't belong to their dictionary. If they disliked you, they would say it to your face, and if they wished to fight with you, they would warn you first. Without such straightforward mindsets, he would have not dared hand them such contracts. At best, they could liven up the place with the commotions they triggered. Ileana stretched out her hand, summoning her energy sword before shooting toward Yvonne. While she possessed more fighting skills and experience than Jasmine, those had not been refined with her fast cultivation increase. Now at the 5th step Archknight and Priest ranks, though her cultivation was tremendously higher, she didn't possess more skills than back when she stood at the True Knight rank. Yvonne increased her cultivation level to hers, and before the sword could reach her, deflected it, and directed the blunt side to strike Ileana's chest through her own hand. She flew back, landing by Jasmine's side. The abysmal gap shocked them to the core of their soul, making them feel like ants attempting to gnaw an elephant. At the same time, they realized they'd grown complacent, relying on dual cultivation for fast improvement with a lackluster foundation. Anyone else? No one else dared step forward, all lowering their heads in submission. Satisfied, Yvonne carried on. Then, from now on, I'm the head consort. If you're dissatisfied, you can come to fight me at any time. I welcome all challengers. Of course, at this pace, you should all refrain from doing so before another 1,000 years. Her eyes then fell on the two defeated who were returning to their feet. The reality of the situation is that, at the moment, most of you are dead weights with limited use. In the grand scheme of things, you can bring Conrad no support. Therefore, if you don't want to fade into the background and spend the rest of eternity raising the kids, you should know what to do. Yvonne's harsh words hammered at the lady's self-esteem. However, they were forced to agree that she was correct. Even the semi-saintesses felt that they were quickly becoming obsolete, and as Conrad's cultivation rose, their worth dwindled. Soon, he would have no use for them, and they would turn into trophy concubines. But among hundreds of such trophies, how could they stand out? If they didn't want to fade into oblivion, there was only one way ahead. To become mighty. Forever stronger, forever mightier. That was the only way to either maintain or increase their status in Conrad's mind. It was also the only way to take Yvonne down her pedestal. That being the case, it was time to train. I will leave a pure self in this mansion when I'm not present to guide the cultivation and battle training of those interested. If you are willing to learn, I'm willing to teach and stand available to all. The likes of Jasmine didn't possess a clear understanding of what pure selves represented. However, in the semi-saint's ears, those words rung like thunderclaps. Could it be that she recovered? Hell wondered alongside the former inquisitresses. If Yvonne had truly recovered or were in the process of doing so, then it would soon be time to calculate old debts. This concludes the introductions. Yvonne, let's dual cultivate. With that said, Conrad pulled Yvonne by the hand and left for his cultivation chambers where the time-warping clock operated. There, they inaugurated Yvonne's return to the holy rank through another epic dual cultivation session. Yvonne, you truly never disappoint. Your hard-then-soft approach solved all my harem issues in a heartbeat. Conrad praised while stroking Yvonne's cheeks as the two lied naked within the bedsheets. It's not like you didn't already expect it. It is one thing to expect, another to have your expectations fulfilled. Clearly, you were born to rule by my side. When I conquer the world, you shall be my empress. Conrad theatrically pledged, causing Yvonne's lips to curl into a smile. You want to call yourself Emperor? She asked in an amused tone. Of course, why would I not? There is no greater title. A title's weight depends solely on who wields it. The title doesn't make the man makes the title. Conrad nodded in approval. Hell's 4 rulers were called kings. However, what emperor dare put himself above them? The king of hell title stood at the pinnacle of the multiverse. Moreover, emperor is incomparably corny. Yours should be unique and reflect your inner self. Yvonne pursued while trailing her index on Conrad's chest. True, Conrad acknowledged, and arched his eyebrows to look for something more suitable. As a monarch, Talroth was known as Southern King of Hell, but as a deity, he was referred to as Lord of Lust. Then let's have 2 titles. I'm still debating what my monarch title will be, but in my religious cult, I shall be named Profane Prince. You can be my Profane Princess. Yvonne stifled a laugh. Profane Prince. Why not? I like. And one day, that casually picked title would make the multiverse tremble, causing mortals and deities alike to shiver on bended knees. Chapter 142 Hekara. Bedsheet activities then resumed, following which Conrad connected to the system and checked his current EXP count. 844 million awaited. An unsurprising count considering that he'd first diddled the Virgin Peak Semi-Saint Yvonne, then diddled the Rising Saint Yvonne, all across 2 days. Conrad directly exchanged 600 millions to upgrade his bloodline level to Phantasm Lord, making his EXP drop to 244 million. The transformation then began. Berserk demonic energies erupted from his form while his eyes turned purple and a strange tattoo appeared on the left side of his chest. On the right, Conrad already had the lion-headed eagle tattoo of the Anzu beast. But now on the left was something that looked like a 3-headed creature riding a dragon-like beast. The creature seemed to have a bull's head on the left, a man's in the middle, and a ram's on the right. Meanwhile, Conrad's demon form also obtained some changes. Above his goat horns grew a larger pair of jet-black ram horns, while his gray skin turned scarlet. All around, his speed, strength, resilience, and regeneration abilities increased several folds while new abilities sprang within his mind. Yvonne, who lied by his side, was startled by the sudden change, not understanding how and why his bloodline seemed to have reached a brand new level. Moreover, if before she had no trouble resisting the orchid scent swirling around him, now she could feel a tingling sensation within her lower abdomen and her lust rising alongside it. What is the meaning of this? Bloodline upgrade? Conrad nonchalantly replied while stretching out his right hand. A purple flame appeared within, turning into a small, ordinary-looking orchid that concealed vast demonic energies. Interesting, Conrad whispered while observing the orchid within his hand. Yvonne was completely baffled. Since when could bloodlines get upgraded out of the blue for no reason whatsoever? Bloodline levels were fixed at birth and could not be increased. The only way upward was to steal someone else's bloodline through one way or another. That, or through powerful contracts with mighty demon nobles or deities. What secret did Conrad's body hide that his bloodline level could rise without warning? However, although curiosity assailed her mind, she didn't plan to probe further. Yvonne, since you've taken the mantle of head consort, isn't it time we officially get married? Conrad asked with a mischievous smile while remaining in his demon form. Yvonne frowned. Clearly, Conrad wasn't the type to bring a woman to the wedding altar unless a critical situation called for it. That being the case, what was he really offering? She assessed the possibilities within her mind and soon came to a conclusion. You want to sign a contract? Yes, indeed. A partnership of equals between you and I. Otherwise, how could you truly be the mistress of the household? While Yvonne wasn't well-versed in matters of the infernal realm, she still knew quite a bit. At the very least, the 2 primary types of contracts were something she was well aware of. What will happen afterward? The entirety of my talent to you. The entirety of your talent to me. One of my physiques to you, one of your physiques to me. The contract will also cleanse the impurities in your bloodline and restore it to pure blood Hekarat level. Just like all the other beast nobles, the Void-winged serpents were restoration beast descendants whose bloodline could be traced back to the infernal realm. Demons, fiends, and demonic beasts constituted the hierarchy of hell, with demonic beasts being the lowest and demons being the highest. Winged serpents traced their origin back to the demon god Dulran, whose descendants were the Hecorites, gigantic serpent demons controlling darkness and hellfire. Conrad couldn't grant demonic bloodlines he didn't possess, but he could use the contract to remove the impurities in demonic bloodlines and restore Yvonne's blood to pureblood Hecarit level. From then on, the system would help him improve it with discounts, and her future prospects would be limitless. What Conrad didn't mention was that this was the best contract he'd ever devised to this day. Ileana and Jasmine both received a bonus equivalent to 5% of his talent, while he received 100% of theirs. That contract might have been enough to make them true members of his household, but it was not genuine equality. With Yvonne, it would be different. It had to be. Needless to say, Yvonne was flabbergasted. If the first condition slightly benefited her, the second one was clearly to Conrad's advantage. However, the third, it wasn't just an advantage, but a life-changing opportunity. The only flaw left within Yvonne's foundation was her bloodline level, which was astounding on mortal plane standards, but couldn't stand out in the higher realms. But if she obtained demon noble blood, then she had full confidence that godhood would not be the end of her path. It would only be a new beginning. What? Not willing? Are you kidding me? Even without those benefits, I would be willing. But with those, I only have one thing to say. Please hurry up. Conrad struggled to not burst into laughter. He then released the demonic glyphs to begin the contract, laying out terms to which Yvonne agreed one after the other. Once she agreed to the last condition, he cut open his mouth, pulling her by the waist and kissing her with his blood-stained lips. Yvonne's talent became his, while his became hers, the duo boosting one another to brand new heights. He obtained her supreme overlord physique, while she obtained his holy primal physique. The impurities in her bloodlines then slowly subsided, cleansed by the mixture between the contract's energy and Conrad's blood. When the cleansing ended, Yvonne's silver-slit eyes turned Hessenite, while her winged serpent beast blood was replaced by the noble Hecarit lineage, thus marking her entrance into the fold of demonkind. At the same time, Yvonne could feel that not only did her new blood further increase her cultivation talent, but it also refined her physiques, making them approach the mastered stage. Meanwhile, her strength, speed, and resilience all obtained a qualitative boost. Yvonne, welcome to the household. Chapter 143, Summoning the Familiar. After placing a ring on her finger, Conrad left Yvonne to adjust to her new powers and dived into his second space treasure to test his. This was the place where he contained his demonic beasts, a legion of almost 8,000 chiefly composed of rabble. With his current strength, Conrad had no use for them. However, that didn't mean they couldn't be improved. Stepping into the second space treasure, he landed into a vast wasteland far from the demonic beast habitat and started drawing eldritch circles on the ground. You want to summon a familiar? The flame mark remarked as he carried on with his drawings. Indeed, now that I've reached this bloodline level, I should at least have one, right? As high-ranking demon nobles, phantasm lords were born at the holy rank with saint-level familiars by their side. Conrad didn't have the fortune of being born at that level. However, he could still summon his familiar and obtain a saint-level goon. There was no need to think twice. However, the flame mark disagreed. With your current bloodline level, summoning a saint-level familiar will not be a problem. However, except for a body with a cultivation base, there isn't much it has and can do that I can't. Before you reach the holy rank, you also won't be able to upgrade its strength. Familiars were like a mirror of their master's self and grew alongside them. Thus, many often saw them as a second cultivation base. The familiar's foundation might not be as robust as his master's, but his cultivation level would keep rising alongside his. If the master reached godhood, the familiar would also become a deity. I say, you wait for the holy rank first. I disagree. Conrad cut while finishing his drawings. On the ground now lied a strange formation of overlapping circles, pentagrams, and diagrams of various forms with beastly shapes lying within them. Conrad extended his hand toward the formation, releasing a large stream of purple flames that dived into the markings, lighting them, and releasing vast purple smoke that soared toward the sky. Why are you so adamant on getting a familiar? For some reason, the flame mark felt restless. As soon as Conrad's bloodline reached the Phantasm Lord level, it could feel his mind undergoing some changes, potentially making him more ruthless than he already was. And it was right. Since the last bloodline evolution, Conrad's entire mind seethed with one thought: might. Although his cultivation had not increased, his mind burned with the confidence of inborn superiority, as if his very blood was convincing him that through his lineage alone, he was mighty. Moreover, the new powers and possibilities brought by this new bloodline level reassured those thoughts. What? Afraid of becoming obsolete? How could that be? But the flame mark was indeed afraid of such a fate, fearing that from now on, Conrad would no longer pay it any heed. Good. Conrad cut open his palm, throwing his blood into the mix. The sky darkened, the purple smoke turned red, while flames of the same color descended from above alongside a deluge of red thunderbolts to slam the circles before Conrad. A deafening explosion of demonic energies spread within the space world, alarming the demonic beasts in the distance. However, Conrad remained unfazed, waiting for the red smoke to disperse and reveal his new servant. Soon enough, he could spot the shadow of a new form designing itself within, and as the smoke dispersed, a monstrous creature appeared before him. A 9 meters tall hulky mass of red muscle, a dreadful form with clawed hands and hooved feet, a large set of sharp, elongated teeth, nearly 2 meters long goat horns above which rested another pair of longer ram horns. Its purple eyes left no place for white, and its face was just as monstrous as the rest of its scarlet body, a devilish picture matching all demonic folklore on Earth. Although the cultivation erupting from it stood at the peak of the rising saint rank, Conrad didn't doubt it could effortlessly shred profound saints such as the Empress in half. "Greetings, Master," the creature hailed in a throaty, booming voice while falling onto its knees. "Impressive," Conrad commented with a smile. The creature looked like an odd mixture between his true form and a giant devil straight out of the nightmares of an overly zealous priest. Calling it dreadful was an understatement, but of course, Conrad didn't care. "What's your name, familiar?" "I'm nameless. Only Master is allowed to grant me a name." "Well, from now on, let's call you Kron." Conrad randomly named his new servant. "Kron thanks Master for bestowing a name." Conrad nodded. At the same time, all information regarding Kron's abilities appeared within Conrad's mind. "Tell me, Kron, are you ready to serve your master?" "Always," Kron replied, without hesitation. "Good. Then rid me of the pesky spiritual consciousness hiding within this mark," Conrad ordered, extending his arm toward Kron and rolling up his sleeve to display a purple flame-shaped mark. "Conrad, what is the meaning of this?" The flame mark roared within Conrad's mind. "Meaning? Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm getting rid of you." "Why? I've been nothing but useful to you. Without me, you'd still be unaware of the realities of this world and wouldn't have been able to obtain the power of totems, to say nothing of the fact that I also saved your life." The flame mark bellowed in indignation. But since Conrad's order remained unchanged, Kron didn't pay attention to the exchange and began refining it alongside all the knowledge it contained. "True, you've been wonderful help. However, I do not feel at ease knowing that within me, there is an entity of significant power, capable of taking over my body at times, but whose allegiance lies with someone else, father or not. You do not belong to me. You do not serve me. As long as my interests align with that cheap father's, you will obey, but the day they do not, I dread what you can and will do. Therefore, I have to get rid of you. It's time to say goodbye, Flame Mark. But don't worry, Kron here will refine all you got and not allow your powers and knowledge to go to waste." Conrad straightforwardly explained while purple mist rose from his mark and flew into Kron's open mouth. Ha 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 ha, bastard, bastard. The flame mark burst into laughter as its last bits of consciousness fell into Kron's mouth. Your Majesty, the boy, is growing, but I'm not sure this direction will help your grand aspiration. Those were the last thoughts within the flame mark's mind before Kron completely refined it, thus erasing it from the face of Earth. Master, the task is complete. Clap, clap, clap. Conrad clapped while nodding in a show of approval. Good job, Kron. Now come with me. We have demonic beasts to train and a world to conquer. As you command, Master. Then, alongside the towering Kron, Conrad stepped toward the forest where he kept his legion of demonic beasts. Meanwhile, in the infernal realm's southern domain's royal palace, Tauroth, still surrounded by his many succubi, felt the disappearance of the flame mark's consciousness. With a wave his hand, the image of all it saw before it vanished appeared before him. Oh, how unruly! He shook his head from left to right, then dispelled the image. Children these days. Chapter 144 Blood Orchids. The trip toward the demonic beast's forest would have been unremarkable were it not for Kron's booming footsteps that shook the earth and left deep prints within the ground. The noise reached such a threshold that Conrad could no longer endure it. Kron, use your transformation skill to adopt a human size. As you command, Master. Kron replied before executing Conrad's order. Just like Conrad, he was equipped with a transformation skill that could deceive even saints and help him conceal his cultivation and true form if need be. Using it, Kron went from 9 to 1.7 meter, turning into a short and stocky monster that obediently walked behind Conrad. Though less imposing, the change in shape did nothing to diminish his powers. As they reached the forest's edge, through mental orders, Conrad signaled for the nearly 8,000 demonic beasts to make their way toward him in orderly fashion. Again, the earth shivered, the stampede of the beast legion creating a much more horrifying sound than the lone Kron ever could. The beasts soon reached destination, stopping before Conrad in order of strength. The monstrous beasts stood at the helm while the lesser beasts formed a platoon at the back. Between the two were the superior, voracious, and intermediate beasts. Although Conrad saw them as rabble, if unleashed in the outside world, those creatures could effortlessly flatten any low to mid-level noble house. System: exchange 200 million EXP for 200 low-grade transcendent-level blood restoration pills. All right. The system completed the exchange, causing the 200 blood restoration pills to drop by Conrad's side. Kron, you keep a hold of those pills. Every time I weaken, feed me one. Understood. Kron waved his clawed hands, firing a surge of telekinetic power that pulled the transcendent blood restoration pills toward him. Conrad then stretched out his arms, letting the vast demonic energies concealed in his body erupt and coalesce into 100 purple orchids that hovered around him. Each of those orchids contained large quantities of demonic power, and their appearance caused the previously docile demonic beasts to subconsciously become restless. Greed shone within their eyes as they stared at those orchids that had, to them, turned into the most sumptuous delicacies under the heavens. Conrad gashed his wrists, using his telekinetic powers to split his dripping blood into hundreds of droplets which he infused the orchids with. From purple, they turned crimson, but the demonic energies within them only grew stronger, heightening the craving of those demonic beasts. As Conrad's blood loss reached a life-threatening level, Kron fed him a transcendent blood restoration pill, stopping the blood loss and regenerating what he'd lost. Conrad then waved his hands, firing the 100 blood orchids first toward the 87 monstrous beasts. They each swallowed one, and the 13 that remained were consumed by superior beasts. Red and purple light erupted from their bodies as their inner transformation began. The impurities in their demonic beast lineages tremendously lessened, magnifying their bloodlines and letting it approach the fiend level. At the same time, they directly experienced cultivation-based breakthroughs. The superior beasts became monstrous beasts. The low-level monstrous beasts became peak-level monstrous beasts, and the high-level monstrous beasts became accursed beasts. At the same time, as the impurities in their beast blood lessened, Conrad could feel those beasts' battle power improve. "You are reversing their degeneration," the system observed as the beasts refined Conrad's blood orchids. Indeed, when they mated with non-demons, Deva excluded, demons' offspring suffered something called degeneration. The quality of the blood that should have been inherited would drastically lessen, not only harming the offspring's innate talent and future prospects, but also transforming their bloodlines into lesser versions of their demonic parent. The original fiends were created through the blood, energy, and experiments of demon gods. Meanwhile, the first demonic beasts were the results of fiends mating with pure-blooded demons. This was the key reason why demon nobles often looked down on half-breeds who could easily produce inferior bloodlines. For the same reason, the cultivation path of demonic beasts was called the restoration. As they evolved and broke through new ranks, their bloodline would constantly be sublimated until it returned to their fiend ancestors' level. Of course, in the mortal worlds, very few could achieve that. You really don't cherish yourself, reversing the degeneration of nearly 8,000 beasts. Are you not afraid of going into shock? The system's worries were not groundless. If Conrad weren't careful, going into shock was very likely. On the road to supremacy, sacrifices are inevitable. If those 8,000 beasts can become 8,000 accursed and decadent beasts in the span of a few weeks, all is worth it, Conrad replied, then bypassed the demonic beasts to step into the forest and carry out with his preparations. With Kron to support his blood and energy loss, Conrad covered the entirety of the demonic beast forest trees in blood orchids. He then enforced rules and quotas in the beasts' minds to prevent infighting before returning them to the forest. He now looked pale and haggard, unable to stand without Kron's support. Sitting cross-legged, Conrad entered meditation to recover his strength before standing up for his last location. "Kron, for now, you stay here to supervise those beasts. When I need you, I shall summon you." "Master, you don't need to worry. I will make sure they don't slack off." Conrad nodded, then headed toward his last destination, Margot Kriegel. In one of the Space Mansion's prison cells lied the former Grand Inquisitress, Margot Kriegel. After tossing her into the Space Mansion's captivity, Conrad had her injuries tended to before no longer paying her any heed. Not that he'd forgotten about her, but he didn't have use for her yet. Now, it was different. With his new powers, countless opportunities lied ahead. Stepping into the jail, Conrad walked toward Margot's cell with his arms crossed beneath his chest. She lied on the cold ground, crossed-legged in meditation. Although the cells prevented her from using her cultivation, they couldn't stop her from cleansing her mind through regular meditation. Good willpower. Having been trapped in this dark, cold cell for all those weeks without the right to see anyone or take a single step outside. Yet, your mind remains steady. I'm impressed. Conrad began, his voice causing Margot to awaken from her trance. The foundation laid by my 1,000 years of cultivation cannot crumble because of a few weeks, Margot calmly replied, not turning toward Conrad. Is that so? Conrad chortled. As I recall, the lifespan of a semi-saint is of roughly 5,000 years, right? A few weeks might not be enough to make you waver, but what about another 1,000 years? Conrad's eyes shone with purple light, causing Margot's body to tremble and the scenery around her to undergo drastic changes. In that new world, years flew by as she remained trapped within the cell, unable to step outside, unable to meet anyone, or breathe anything besides the cold, oppressive air of the underground. Although she soon lost the notion of time, the weight of the decades and centuries crashed onto her, driving her into the deepest recesses of her mind as she contended with her rising insanity. In that way, 1,000 years passed. 1,000 is not enough? No problem, let's add another 3,000. The purple light once again flashed, and this time, although Margot struggled to resist the effects of millennia of imprisonment, her mind faltered, and she crumbled onto the ground, seeing her body shrivel alongside her soul as she headed to the end of her lifespan, alone. Voices boomed within her head as insanity sat within, and her eyes went bloodshot. Stop. Enough, I beg you. The scenery once again changed, and Margot returned to the real world. Her terror-stricken eyes rose to meet Conrad, whose otherworldly looks did nothing to alter the dread within her chest. What do you want from me? You misunderstand. Your punishment is merely a result of your own actions. Supervising my torture regimen is, you see, a cardinal sin that would have gotten you butchered were you not a gorgeous lady. Conrad straightforwardly replied, This is not about what I want from you, but what you want from me. Tell me, Margot, what is it that you really want? What is your deepest desire? Tell, and as long as you're willing to pay the price, I will fulfill it. As Conrad's lips moved, his words echoed within Margot's head like a compelling force she could not resist. Chapter 145 Nil Circumstances. I want to become a saint, Margot replied. She had been trapped at the 6th step semi-holy rank for centuries and could not break through. It wasn't due to a lack of talent, but rather to insufficient resources. If the church were willing to set aside the resources for her, she might not have been able to become a saint, but at the very least, she would have reached the peak of the semi-holy priest rank by now. A pity that her lack of factionalism made her position unsteady even in the Inquisitress department, to say nothing of the church as a whole. That, I can do. I can even make a saint in both the martial and spiritual paths. However, are you willing to pay the price? Conrad's words and following inquiry caused Margot's eyes to widen in shock. However, she quickly recomposed herself. What price? As long as I can reach sainthood, I can pay any price. Different eyes had different skies. For the current Margot, the saint level was the pinnacle of cultivation, while the divine rank was nothing but a pipe dream, a cultivation folk tale. In the Holy Flame Empire's 100,000 years of history, there had never been a star-taming stage expert, to say nothing of the divine rank. Therefore, most cultivators saw sainthood as the end of the road, the achievement of a lifetime. Margot was no exception, but with her talent and resources, sainthood would forever remain an elusive dream. If there really was an opportunity to seize, she could pay any price. Your soul, Conrad replied while rotating his hand. A purple orchid appeared within, before floating toward Margot. This is a phantasm orchid. If you pledge it your soul and sign the pact with a drop of your blood, it will fulfill your wish. Conrad explained as the orchid landed in Margot's hands. That's simple. That's simple. Margot no longer hesitated, raising the orchid before her eyes to make her pledge. I want to become a saint. I want to become a saint. If you can fulfill my wish, my soul is yours. She then bit her finger to blood and released one drop onto the orchid. The blood vanished within, and the orchid shone with dazzling purple light. Conrad observed the scene with rapt attention. Naturally, he could have completed that contract on his own in the usual way. He could even have compelled Margot into surrendering herself if he so wished. With his current bloodline level, women beneath the holy rank could no longer resist him. However, he wanted to experiment with this new power. If everything went without a hitch, then from now on, he possessed a way to contract people en masse all across the empire without being personally present. And without a hitch, it went. Margot's eyes shone with purple light while House Tauritha's mark of servitude appeared on her chest, and her soul became Conrad's to do with as he saw fit. Her talent became his, and at the same time, her cultivation rose at breakneck speed. 7th step, semi-holy priest. 8th step, 9th step, rising saint. Her spiritual cultivation stopped at the peak of the rising saint rank. Meanwhile, martial cultivation appeared within her body and rose until it also reached the summit of the rising saint rank. Feeling the new force submerge her body, Margot's eyes shone with a mixture of astonishment and delight. Finally, the day had arrived. She was a saint. From now on, across the Holy Flame Empire, She was a top-level expert. "Thank you for your grace, master." Margot kowtowed. As soon as she dropped her blood onto the orchid, Conrad's image appeared within her mind, and he instantly became her all. So once they dropped their blood on the orchid, I don't even need to rewire them. Good to know. The orchid within Margot's hands vanished into nothingness, leaving only her cultivation to remind her that this wasn't a dream. Rise, now that you've obtained what you wanted. It's time to serve your new master. Meanwhile, in one of the cold quarters' empty mansions, Nils was locked to reflect on her deeds. The cold quarter naturally didn't bear that name because of temperature. It was the place where the disgraced members of the imperial family were sent to reflect on their deeds in confinement. They were often given empty quarters where the sound of passing breezes served as the only distraction and locked in a room in which they would remain confined until the emperor wished otherwise. In one such a room, Nils lied on her back, her eyes staring at the ceiling above, while someone nagged her from outside the door. "Nils, why are you being so stubborn? You only need to admit your wrongs, and your father will immediately let you go. Why do you need to create so much trouble for a dead person? Stop this nonsense." Ank yelled from behind the door. However, Nils remained silent. This only served to further aggravate her. "Unfilial brat. Have you been pampered for so long that you think you're free to do as you please? The situation is different. If you don't resolve yourself to apologize and beg for your father's forgiveness, no one can save you." Following the last humiliation, Ank didn't dare leave her palace. But when she learned that Ulrich wreaked havoc in Yvonne's domain, she overflowed with delight, even deluding herself into thinking that she must have been the cause. However, when the informant mentioned the sixth prince's death, she was terror-stricken. Although Wenzel was the least favored of the 8 princes, he was, at the end of the day, Ulrich's flesh and blood. News circulated that he attempted to attack Ulrich when he conducted Yvonne's punishment and was killed by accident. But who would believe such nonsense? First, in what world did Wenzel have the nerves to take arms against his father? It was already good if he didn't soil his pants upon meeting him. Second, with his close to 1,000 years of cultivation and true origin saint rank, Ulrich's control of his power must have already reached a consummate level. Was it possible for him to accidentally kill anyone? If Wenzel died, then it meant Ulrich wanted him dead. If he could butcher his flesh and blood, what else could he not do? Who was to say that today's favor wouldn't become tomorrow's execution axe? Who was truly safe? Consorts and princes alike were full of fright, carefully watching their moves as to not antagonize the emperor and end up with Wenzel's sorrowful fate. With Nils' current behavior, wasn't she asking for death? Although of her 3 children, Ank favored Nils the least. She was, after all, her daughter. How could she let her head into the path of self-destruction? However, Nils, who remained unaware of those facts, didn't bat an eyelid. Ank despaired. "Even if you won't do it for yourself, do it for your brothers. They've been locked for so long, their future unknown, especially Holger, with his cultivation destroyed, and without the status of a prince to shield him. How can he endure confinement? They've taken such good care of you across those years, giving you unconditional love and affection impossible to find in any imperial family. Are you really going to turn a blind eye to their plight because of an outsider?" Chapter 146, The One That Always Smiles. As she heard Ank's words, Nils' eyes twitched. It would be a lie to say that her brother's current conditions didn't make her heart ache. They were her closest relatives in this world and had always been at her side, supporting her through all endeavors. However, as Anselm's face reappeared within her mind, her softening heart was replaced by rage. They only have themselves to blame. Who asked them to foment such an evil ploy? I will never forgive them. Hearing those words, Ank knew that all her words were like eggs thrown at a brick wall. As Nils' mother, she knew that her most descriptive trait wasn't her righteous heart. No, it was her stubbornness. Once she set her mind on something, besides herself, no one could make her waver. Therefore, if she weren't willing to forget and forgive, regardless of what her mother said, she never would. Aware of that, Ankh shook her head. They have loved you in vain. In this world, what is good? What is evil? Born in the imperial family, how could say such naive words? Ultimately, Ulrich is to blame for this, raising you like a fledgling phoenix in a golden cage and keeping the realities of this world, of this house, away from you. Regardless of villainy, winners are hailed as kings. Regardless of kindness, losers are condemned as criminals. When imperial power is concerned, right and wrong exist only in the mind of the delusional. House von Jürgen doesn't have a living good person. If you don't learn to adapt, who knows when your corpse will join that of the good people? Hearing those words, Nils frowned. Deep down, she knew her mother's words correct. The imperial family was a den of wolves struggling for power and favor. All smiles were false, profit ruled supreme, and righteousness had no foothold. And the reason behind this was her father. Because of how he ruled, of the principles he defended, the house took this callous shape. But toward her, although often strict, that same person showed incomparable love and care. Hence, Nils deluded herself into thinking that he had his own difficulties. But now, she was starting to wonder if this wasn't all a farce. The thought daggered her heart. Ankh then turned heels, ready to leave. But then, she stopped, and following a brief internal struggle, declared, "In the imperial palace, Ulrich von Jürgen is heaven's. If he cherishes you, no one can harm you, and your status is unshakable. But once he sees you as an eyesore, even the divine flame lord cannot save you. Use his favor to cement your position, instead of testing the limits of his patience." Ankh didn't dare reveal Wenzel's fate to Nils. In the imperial palace, no one dared. All knew that the emperor's love for that only daughter was rivaled only by his ruthlessness. Thus, knowledge that could deepen the rift between them wasn't something they dared bring to her ears. Saying nothing further, Ankh left. But as she stepped outside of the mansion, she failed to realize that from the shadows, someone observed her. Once she left, that person emerged from the darkness, revealing himself as the second prince, Adelar von Jürgen. Adelar stepped inside. The guards at the mansion's gate never realized his presence or entrance. Undisturbed, he crossed the hallway until he reached the sealed gate behind which Nils lied. With a gentle shove, as if there were no lock to begin with, he pushed the gate open and walked in. Adelar's sudden appearance took Nils by surprise, and with a frown, she turned toward him. "Second brother? What are you doing here?" Nils defensively asked, unable to understand how Adelar snuck in. Though handsome and refined, the second prince, Adelar von Jürgen, was an unremarkable, low-key person. No one knew his cultivation level, and rarely did the world hear of his deeds. On the outside, he also never formed factions, didn't compete for the crown, and treated everyone with sincerity. However, Nils believed him to be the most monstrous person of this wretched family. No one could always smile, but Adelar always did, his face forever showing amiability and contentment. For that reason, Nils dreaded him even more than her father. Unlike Elmar, Nils, and Holger, Adelar wasn't a pure-blooded paragon spirit. That plus his excessively low-key attitude made many dismiss him as inferior to Elmar in cultivation talent. But Elmar disagreed. Only father knows Adelar's cultivation level. It's not that others don't want to, but they can't see through it. However, at the very least, he's my equal. Those words of Elmar still resounded in Nils' mind. Their implication, as clear as daylight. Elmar was crown prince since birth. The resources at his disposal leagues above that of his other siblings. If Adelar could still catch up to him with that gap, then he was indeed a frightening individual. "Can't a brother visit his confined sister? I thought you could use the company." Adelar began, his voice carrying a melodious tone that lowered the listener's guard and put the mind at ease. However, Nils didn't let that confuse her. "Second brother, you and I aren't that close." "True." Adelar agreed and sat by Nils' side. "Actually, I thought you'd want to know that our brothers are being framed," Adelar said with his eternal smile, causing Nils' face to ripple with a new wave of astonishment. However, she quickly recomposed herself. What makes you say that? Adelar lied with his back against the wall and his hands resting on his thighs, while his eyes locked onto Nils. It's simple, really. Although they indeed had all the reasons in the world to want the boy dead, there are many questionable points. The first one being the men used to carry out the task. Besides Holger's guard captain, not a single one of them could be identified. Their heads destroyed by Wolfgang. Moreover, don't you find it odd that in order to assassinate your friend, Holger dispatched his own guard captain? A man that obeyed only to him and could so easily incriminate him? Even if he were that brain-damaged, is Elmar that foolish? Nils had to agree that Adler's words made perfect sense. To say nothing of Elmar, Holger could never commit such a blunder. Another questionable point is timing. As soon as the boy died, and before the assassins could even break out, Wolfgang appeared to dispatch them, as if he knew they were there beforehand. As Adler's explanation carried on, Nils' eyes kept widening. We also need to question how those assassins, whose strongest cultivator was merely in the transcendent rank, managed to sneak into a core location of Housecraft guarded by the semi-saint Wolfgang on the day of his daughter's wedding. And if that's not enough, ask yourself why Hubert Voigt appeared at that critical moment. All those points combined clearly tell us that the whole thing was a sham meant to frame our brothers. The guard captain was either conned by an outsider, posing as Holger, or compromised in one way or another. Considering that he vanished before his execution, I'd lean on the later. Nils' eyes shone with enlightenment. Chapter 147. Nils breaks out. Therefore, I conclude that Housecraft is the real mastermind behind the assassination. Knowing that Elmar would eventually strike, they chose to deal the first blow. Which then raises the question. Was Wolfgang so desperate that for the sake of striking back at the imperial family, he would sacrifice his house's #1 talent? I don't think so. Again, Adelar grasped the core issue. With the shocking talent he displayed, Anselm represented Housecraft's future, and once paired with the baptized Ileana, they could bring the Cracked to an era of splendor. No sane man would be willing to give up such a gem for that level of benefit. Meaning the dead boy is fake. The real Anselm still breathes, hidden somewhere, most likely being trained in the shadows to keep his life safe while bidding his time for his ascension and return. Adelar concluded, causing Nils' eyes to brighten with a mixture of hope and expectations. However, there was still something left to verify. Why are you telling me all this? With Elmar out of the picture, you're the one that stands to benefit the most. The Holy Flame Empire followed strict agnatic primogeniture. The eldest son was heir to the throne, and if he died, the next oldest male prince would replace him. In the rare case that the crown prince was deposed due to heavy misconduct, the second prince still replaced him. Therefore, Adelar would soon become the new crown prince, and it stood to reason that any truth that benefited Elmar should have been buried by him. Hence, Nils couldn't understand why he was sharing his insight with her. Adelar's smile remained unchanged. The competition for the throne is a family matter. Though Elmar is my rival, he's, first and foremost, the eldest prince. His prestige is the imperial family's prestige. It's loss ours. My selfish motive is to use you to pull the truth out of Wolfgang's mouth, punish the Cracked, and save the imperial family's face. However, I can only do it if you're willing to help me. If you are, I will help you escape confinement and sneak out of the imperial palace to interrogate Wolfgang. Are you? Hearing Adelar's offer, Nils floundered. Not because she wanted to help him clear charges. No, ultimately this whole thing began because Elmar was too greedy and wouldn't leave the Cracked any way out. He only had himself to blame, and perhaps confinement would help him turn over a new leaf. At least, she hoped so. Whether to escape the palace or not was the real source of her inner struggle. If she did, there was a slim hope she could find the truth about Anselm. However, what would happen when her father realized her disappearance? Would she be back by then? If she weren't, what would he do? Those were questions that needed solid answers before she dared escape. By the way, the prosperous Wind Third Prince will soon set out to claim your hand. Father has no way to stop this. In a few months at best, you will be a princess consort of the prosperous Wind Empire. With the recent events, Nils had almost forgotten that reality. Therefore, regardless of what you want to do, you have to do it now. You need to take the risk at this very instant. There will be no other opportunity because I won't risk offering you one past today. Though mild, Adler's words left no room for negotiations. If she refused today, then this was it. Throughout this life, she would never meet him again. The last chance. Agreed? The conviction within her eyes convinced Adler that his plan could carry on unhindered. Good. I will try to keep your disappearance a secret for as long as possible. Hopefully, you will be back before anyone notices. Adler then stood up and extended his hand toward Nils. Come, let's leave this place. Nils looked at Adler's hands with confusion, not sure whether he was jesting or not. However, the seriousness within his gaze seemed to indicate otherwise. Just like that? Just like that. Though still hesitant, Nils took his hand. Without any artifice, Adler carried her outside, locking the door behind them and leading her past the guards who seemed completely unaware of their presence. In that manner, he brought her to the Imperial Palace's exit. Nils' eyes were full of fright. From the cold quarter to the exit, there were at least dozens of miles. However, she could swear that Adler only took 9 steps to carry her over there. Could he be a space attribute user? Space was one of the rarest attributes, its users often finding themselves in the Great Void Empire's space temple. In the Holy Flame Empire, one hand was enough to count all the space attribute users. Adler was never on the list. Why was he revealing that secret before her? Did he really trust her that much? Take this, Adler said while extending a silver bracelet toward Nils. What is it? When you're ready to return, you only need to rub it 3 times, and I will send you back. Those words confirmed Nils' suspicions. So, you really are? Time is of the essence. Hurry up. I hope your trip will be fruitful, and we can together recover the imperial family's dignity. Nils thought that perhaps she'd misjudged that second brother of hers, and knowing that she had no intention to help him regain anything, she felt guilty. Still, she couldn't let go of the opportunity, nodded, and darted toward the cracked mansion. As she vanished, Adler turned heels, walking back toward his own quarters. There, another Paragon spirit man awaited. The third prince, Lorenz von Jürgen. I suppose it went without a hitch? Indeed. That child still has a lot to learn when it comes to dealing with centuries-old creatures like ourselves. Adler replied to Loren's inquiry. I'm confused. Why take so much trouble for Housecracked? You don't really intend to help Elmar, do you? Although Adler had warned Lorenz of his plan and asked him to make some arrangements, he didn't share his entire thoughts with him. From the moment Wolfgang Cracked dared conspire against us, Housecracked needed to be destroyed. Although he doesn't say it, Father is of the same mind. However, with the church watching from the side, he needs a valid reason. We will give him one. Nils has been abducted. That is reason enough to dispatch troops. Nils was found captive in the Cracked mansion. That is reason enough to destroy them. At the same time, her relationship with that cracked boy doesn't seem simple. Perhaps we can use her to lure him out and execute that hidden danger once and for all. Used to Adler's lethal ploys, Lorenz was undisturbed. You seem oddly concerned by this case? We should all be. A point all seem unable to grasp is that Holger was in on the ploy and helped frame Elmar. Hearing those words, Loren's eyes widened in disbelief. That is impossible. The relationship between the two is more solid than iron. Anyone can do it, except him. Yet, it is indeed him. If the usual Holger learned of his most trusted being swindled into an assassination attempt, he would have kept silent and then presented himself as the sole culprit, not giving Elmar an opportunity to take the blame. However, he did precisely the opposite. In fact, all his deeds pushed Elmar into the trap. Therefore, we're dealing with someone capable of making Holger risk destruction to entrap his closest brother. Neither Wolfgang nor Hubert possess those skills. Such a terrifying individual, and we don't know who he is. Loren's eyes shone with fright. Between the cracked and the void exists someone earnestly working toward the imperial family's destruction. With luck, we can make him reveal a flaw. If we can't, fine. Let's first destroy the cracked trouble. Lawrence nodded in approval. Don't worry, the spies are ready. As soon as Nils steps into House Cracked, we will be alerted and can then let the guards discover her disappearance. Good. When the news spread and Father's fury explode, you will offer to lead the rescue mission. Father will agree. You can use that opportunity to gain merit for future use. Lawrence nodded. However, he still had something troubling him. Won't Nils reveal everything afterward? The bracelet not only allows me to locate and transport her, but through it, I can also erase her memories from a distance. When we need her to forget our involvement, she will. Tonight, the moon hung high in the sky, and as its light illuminated Adler's face, Lawrence couldn't help but find him more dreadful. Chapter 148, It's a Trap. Back in the space mansion, Conrad was busying himself deflowering Margot to accumulate energy and EXP. Although she'd now reached the holy rank, because, or her ordinary meridians, she wasn't a good dual cultivation partner for the transcendent rank him. Still, she could help him rapidly increase his soul force, thus easing his spiritual cultivation. At the same time, he could use the rest of the energy absorbed through the dual cultivation to improve either his other harem members or his demonic beasts. Margot tightly clenched the bar cells, bent over while Conrad held her waist and hammered her from behind. As his hips rocked her supple ass, she moaned in delight, surrendering to the rough pleasure of her cunt being pounded into heaven by his large, thick meat rod. Oh, ch, she roared, sinking into another orgasm and sliding off Conrad's rod, which still throbbed in erection. Conrad shook his head in disappointment. For some reason, with this bloodline increase, finding pleasure became even more challenging. It was almost as if his rod didn't acknowledge Margot as woman enough to bring it release. Although her saint cultivation had been granted by his contract, she still used to be a high-level semi-saint. How was that background still lacking? Perhaps it was a mixture of emotions, bloodline, or cultivation. However, Conrad hypothesized that at the moment, Yvonne aside, no one in his harem could bring him true pleasure. He shook his head, then dropped down onto Margot, who lied face first on the ground, tongue lolling out. Without warning, he plunged himself back into her, wreaking blissful havoc in her insides. You're driving me insane, Margot roared while Conrad carried on with the relentless drilling, not stopping until he released a large stream of white-purple spunk inside her. When you regain your senses, come see me. I have a task for you, Conrad ordered and pulled his shaft out of Margot, leaving her to recover on the ground. Why, yes. Still unsatisfied, Conrad organized a cultivation orgy, accumulating more energy, EXP, and helping the ladies break through new realms. It was barely satisfactory. At the same time, looking at the horrible mess around him, he realized that, unbeknown to him, his ability to please women had reached a frightening level. His EXP count was now around 1.2 billion. With half, he promoted his 100-flower scripture to the holy rank. Now, on top of sharing meridians, he could use it in junction with his holy primal physique to rebuild the meridian foundation of his harem ladies if need be. This was of capital importance. Although the innate talent of his women above the transcendent rank was, on mortal plane standards, relatively good, their meridian foundation was an insufferable mess. Not one of them possessed supreme meridians. In fact, he couldn't even find one with ethereal meridians. They'd all relied on natal and concealed meridians to cross the transcendent rank. Because having 27 supreme meridians before divine transformation was the first requirement to break through the divine ascension rank, this was absolutely intolerable. Was the situation not reversed? Unless he somehow granted them the cultivation, none of those ladies could reach divine ascension in a lifetime, to say nothing of achieving godhood. Now at least, he could solve the issue. This is just round 1. When you recover, we will attack round 2. Conrad declared and sat cross-legged to complete his fifth soul transformation. The poor ladies didn't even have the strength to reply, feebly nodding in approval. But at that time, Yvonne walked in. Her eyes swept the dozens of vanquished ladies that lied naked in disarray with silly looks on their faces. Faced with such an outlandish sight, Yvonne couldn't help but frown. What did you do to them? Nothing much. They're just weak and in need of serious training. Conrad's reply didn't match the scene before her eyes. However, Yvonne didn't pay this much attention and returned to proper business. Her new demonic bloodline had further enhanced her sex appeal, making it reach a transcendent level. Inwardly, Conrad was very thankful to the Hekaret lineage. We should return to the outside. I can't be gone for too long, and we need to stay informed of what goes on in the Imperial Palace. Conrad nodded and stood up. As he left, he cast one last glance at the dozens of defeated ladies. You should thank Yvonne for saving your hide. Next time, if the performance is this unsatisfactory, I won't spare you. At the very least, it will be 3 rounds. Conrad pledged, causing Yvonne to wonder how he could utter such shameless words with a straight face. Then in tandem, they exited the space mansion, returning to Yvonne's quarters. It wouldn't be long before the maids fed them shocking news. The princess vanished from confinement, her guards brutally murdered and her whereabouts unknown. They say she must have been kidnapped by an enemy of the imperial family. Conrad's eyes widened in disbelief. When did Nils enter confinement that she was now getting kidnapped from it? Naturally, Ulrich kept the real reason behind the confinement secret to prevent shame and gossips. His Majesty is wild with rage and ordered the third prince to carry out the search. He was given 5 high-level semi-saints and dozens of transcendent rank experts to get results in the shortest of times. Conrad frowned, feeling that this matter was far too fishy, and when he turned toward Yvonne, he saw the same thought within her eyes. An inside job? Unless an expert with unparalleled cultivation suddenly decided to reconvert himself into a princess kidnapper, this had to be an inside job. As for who the culprit was, that was impossible to guess. But at that time, "Boss, the 9th princess is in my yard, demanding to see you." Wolfgang's voice echoed within Conrad's head, and his eyes widened in disbelief. You said what? Is the connection not good? The 9th princess is in my yard, demanding to see you. She's convinced that you're alive, and says she won't leave until she finds you. Wolfgang repeated with the extra details, causing Conrad's mind to shine with enlightenment. Trap, it's a trap. We're being set up. Conrad realized the ploy, and although he couldn't say with certitude who was behind it, he knew that if Nils weren't relocated with haste, there would be no house crack tomorrow. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.